Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to have back on the show for a second time child and foster care, religious abuse, child sexual abuse, trafficking, SRA and RA survivor and whistleblower, campaigner of historical child abuse, founder of S.A.F.E, Seek and Find Everyone Abused in Childhood, independent researcher and reporter, and someone I'm honored to call my friend, Dave Sharp. A little bit about Dave and what we discussed the first time he was on as a refresher, or if you are new here. Just after Dave was born, his mother died and he was put into the care of the Catholic Church, where he spent his first 16 years of life. Dave's life in care was nothing short of horrific. He was trafficked all over Scotland, where he would be taken to houses in and around the Glasgow area with priests in them. He remembers horrific abuses and rituals like being taken to a garden and placed in a coffin with the lid put on, and stones would be thrown onto the lid to stimulate a burial. He also remembers being taken to Ireland on several occasions where he and other boys would be taken to satanic sex parties that included drugging and raping by multiple men. Throughout Dave's childhood and young adult years, he would be taken to many different places, and to this day is still experiencing flashbacks and memory recall. Dave often gets contacted by other survivors who have found his story and will disclose their own testimonies, which corroborate what he remembers. Dave's testimony unveils a systemic rot that has embedded itself into the very fabric of society that targets young children, and reveals how pedophiles and child predators hide behind positions of power that appear on the outside to be in favor of protecting children, when in fact they are using those positions as a veil to hide their vile child abuse and pedophilia. Dave's testimony also outlines how pedophiles target children they believe to be vulnerable, such as a child like Dave who didn't have a family to go home to and who had no one to advocate for him. The only people who were in a position to advocate for Dave were the same people who were abusing him. This actualization, although hard to accept, paints a bigger picture of what is and has been happening to countless victims and survivors who are placed in the care of adults who are believed to be trustworthy and safe due to their titles and positions in society, but who are preyed upon instead. This strategic trickery used by child predators and sexual deviants is how this type of systemic and organized abuse is often overlooked and made invisible to those on the outside looking in, including to parents who unknowingly put their children in harm's way by trusting these child predators based solely on the superficial titles and positions of power they may hold. There is no better place for a pedophile to hide than in a position that allows them unlimited access to children and minors. Dave has been a longtime public advocate and has devoted his life to being a safe space for survivors. He risks his own life daily to be a voice for children like him who had no one to be a voice for them. His selfless servanthood, however, has caused tremendous distress on his life and his emotional and physical health. As detailed in his last episode, Dave is currently on suicide watch and has worked very hard to navigate the destabilization, gaslighting, and secondary abuse that often comes with being a public whistleblower. And despite the toll this experience and advocacy has taken on his life, he devotes his heart and mission to Jesus and continues to have unwavering hope that we can put an end to these atrocities against our children by following God's word and being disciples of his example of doing what's right and what's good. As quoted in the last episode, Dave has said, quote, "I'm so grateful that God has chosen me to go out and show the evil that exists in Scotland and to tell the world to put his children first," unquote. And it is men and women like Dave who will be and are the ones to cause real change in the world that will finally put an end to crimes against children once and for all. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the show, share any information privately with me, or send me a written testimony for my upcoming book series or to be written in a Substack article, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. As some of you may know, my last YouTube channel was recently terminated, and I'm being forced to pivot and use other streaming platforms to get this important information out to the public and disclosure community. Your support would mean the world to me on platforms like Rumble and X, where I'm currently streaming. And I also just started another YouTube channel with the handle at Imagination Podcast Official that I'm rebuilding. And I would love to have you all subscribe there as well while I figure out my new presence on YouTube and how that will look in order to dodge the censorship and backlash for speaking about these difficult topics. Thank you all on the other side of the screen for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming back today's guest of honor, man of God, voice for the voiceless, survivor and overcomer, anti-child abuse advocate, walking miracle, an absolute warrior, the one, the only, Dave Sharp. Dave, thank you so much for being here again with us today. It's an honor to have you back.
Thanks, Emma. That introduction, it feels like I'm supposed to be, I feel like I'm now going to be walking into a ring to have a boxing match. But I guess that's not too far wrong, is it? Because we are in a match here, eh?
We're in a
And
match.
when you say the fight for survival and the fight for children, and the fight against satanic ritual abuse, it's not the spirits, the evil spirits that we're fighting. Sometimes, and what you come across more is fighting against the ignorance of the people who sometimes claim to know and to want to help you. And I've found in myself in my walk that, yeah, coming forward, getting the right help could sometimes be as much a battle as the spiritual battle that we're all in. Yeah.
100%. That's so true. I didn't think about it that way. There is the spiritual battle that we fight, but there is that physical one here that happening at the same time. There's a duality of wars that we're fighting and barriers that we have to get through in order to sort of penetrate this information out to the public, and your story demonstrates how groups of really powerful people make this happen, because
Yeah.
the majority of people that live on this planet can't imagine that this stuff happens, and it's designed that way. It's so complex, it's so deep, there's so many layers to it, there's so many people involved
Yeah.
that when people are faced with this information, they can't, their imaginations, anything that they could possibly try to comprehend, just it doesn't make sense with what they know, and then being
Yeah.
confronted with that information. So I think your story is a tremendous example of how this happens. And then, as we'll be talking about today, how what happens in childhood trails survivors throughout their lives
Yeah.
and the repercussions that has. And then whenever they
Mhm.
go public, or decide to disclose to somebody or, to tell authorities that there's this really deep, dark secondary abuse that happens to shut survivors up. And so what they're testifying never actually makes it out to the public, and this is all by design too. So last time we were sort of starting to get into that aspect of your story, and we were going down the trail of how you found S.A.F.E. For people listening, that's S.A.F.E. and it's all capital letters, and I'll let Dave explain what that is. But if we want to pick up there, and maybe we'll have to go back a little bit here and there, but we'll sort of continue where we left off at that spot.
Yeah. And let me just say first that everybody talks about the matrix and this pyramid of power. What and I'll stick to Scotland because that's all I know where I'm from. What we found in Scotland is that for years and years and years, Scotland's always has been known as a country that puts the children first. And somewhere along the line, we lost that. And when you're talking about this, people that abuse children, what I've found and what's been happening, and probably not just in Scotland, Emma, but the way I put it is that years ago there was a very small section of people who deliberately abused children, either for their own sexual reasons, but also for their own political and personal development. What's happened over the years is that barrier now, the doors have opened up because predominantly we became a non-Christian country. I'll tell you, that's the real reason. Because we became such a non-Christian country and we allowed this evil to step in, where now it's so many people are making money out of the suffering of children. Childhood conferences that are making tens of thousands of pounds, charities, child abuse charities that are making tens of thousands of pounds. And the last thing on their mind is, or sorry, the only thing on their mind is their own personal and political development. And this is what's happening, I guess, all over the country. Especially now we see with the grooming gangs, we're actually seeing how, and we won't go into the Muslim gangs here because but it's the same thing in the sense that so many people just use their power of position and waded their way into powers of position to A, make money and stuff, but B, to use and exploit children. Because that there's more money now, Emma, in children than there is in drugs.
100%. And your story, I mean, just thinking about these predators hiding in a priest suit and preaching to actual Christians and people who are there to, to worship God, and they're having a facade. They're pretending that they're that same type of person, and behind the scenes, they're doing the most absolutely horrific things to kids. It's amazing the lengths that pedophiles will go to hide, and I think too, we look at these positions, we're taught, we're groomed as a society that if somebody is in this type of outfit, if they have this type of degree, if they're in this type of work, lawyers, judges, police, religion, religious leaders, it goes on and on, but we're taught to respect these people just by default because look what they've accomplished when we're not thinking, that some of these people could be predators, if not many of them, and considering the lengths that a predator will go to put a mask on is just, it's beyond, I think, also what people can comprehend. People can't, their minds can't go there to think somebody would go to college for 8 years to get a degree, a law degree, or 10 years, however long it is, just to try to traffic children, essentially. That's really hard for people to think about. But when you're really passionate about something, and these people are very passionate about being child predators, they're very patient, they're smart. Like, this is a very sophisticated type of person. It's not the person that we see in the movies who looks all homeless and, just goes and attacks like a random kid and is on drugs. Like, these are very sophisticated, very smart, deviant people. They are psychopaths, and they'll go to any lengths to live out what they care about and love most, which is preying on children, and your story demonstrates that, I think, better than, a lot of stories. Just from an organizational perspective, you can take what you experienced in your care and apply that to the world, and it's exactly the same, whether it's in that school that you were in, or whether it's, an entire country. It's the same model.
Well, it was the same thing. It was the same thing in each home. 16 years, and I was in 3 or 4 homes. I was also adopted, um, fostered, and then when I told you about the castle, the place where we went, again, we were talking about the earlier on where I was sharing this with another survivor in Belgium, who I'm talking about, and she was using the same language about how she got taken to this posh lakeside castle, and the way she was describing it is exactly what we got put to in Scotland, and what we were told at the time, what I heard was that you've got this all wrong. This was a very posh place where kids got took on summer trips, and again, it was also covered up by people who had their own agenda. But when you're also talking about in the care system, when you're talking about people in people in position of power, if you remember when we spoke last week, when I was on the streets of London in Northampton, more so Northampton, but even especially in London, when we used to have the young kids come up, and I told you this before, Emma, we would get these kids were very quickly put onto, grabbed by the pimps and the drug dealers and put as sex workers, and we would have these cars come up, big fancy Jaguars, and invariably you'd look round and there'd be priests here, priests sitting in the back seat. And this is the kind of power that we're talking about, that, obviously I don't think something like that would happen. But the point is, do we even bother to look? Do we have, this is where the voices need to be heard. When I speak like that, and then, and I guarantee as soon as this is finished and it goes out, I'll get another dozen people saying, that happened to me. And we wonder, why do we not educate? Why don't we talk about this more? Why is it so much easier, as I said earlier on, it's so much easier to pick the one person, attack that one person. Now, anybody speaks straight out, again, whether you're a fan of Tommy Robinson or not, they use the same tactic. It's a very good British tactic where you pick one person and pick on him and pick on him, pick on him and destroy him. Well, the more people who get drawn into that, the less people get drawn into the real abuse that's happening. So the abuse escalates, more and more children get abused, but everybody wants to concentrate on this, what do you call it, bear with me, this, not a crime, this abuse of power, on this one person, and it's very similar to myself, what I went through. Again, leading up to the S.A.F.E, when I'd S.A.F.E, I'd been living homeless for many, many years, and I'd seen all these things happening. The people ending up in prison, ending up in mental hospitals, that lives were broken, completely broken, and so easily manipulated, people making money out of them. And that's when I turned to the charity for help. And I started campaigning on the streets. And that's when I turned to S.A.F.E. And I thought, because what happened was I've been doing all these different campaigns and protests and vigils all over Scotland and in England. And yeah, and everybody seemed to be, it was like a dirty washing machine, similar to what's happening right now with the grooming stuff going on in England. What's happening is now that we've got everybody all coming out, blaming the same people, but the people who have spent years working on this, gaining the trust of the public, are now turning on the people who they turn to for help. And again, you're putting it back 25 years again. We keep falling into this trap. Instead of coming together and working together and working on, see, the only solution for me is to take the responsibility away from the politicians and find our own solutions. So that's what I did. I decided to set up S.A.F.E. I'd been fighting against the Catholic Church and the Christian Brothers and the Scottish government and the Irish Christian Brothers and the police, who were all, I was running around in circles. Again, I knew the truth. I had all this evidence. I had all these witnesses. I had all these newspaper reports, but they were very, very good at undermining me. And yeah, it was very, very easy because of the lost memory. And because of the fact that I'd told people very, very openly about how we had to learn how to lie to cover the abuse as children. So a lot of what we said was misconstrued. And again, it has to be said as well, many times I would get people phone up saying things that I thought, what, is that true? So a lot of the times you didn't actually know the truth from fiction, Emma. But you have to get over these hurdles and keep having the one aim is to put God's children first and find other survivors that can back up your story. So that's what I did when I set up S.A.F.E. But I had no idea by doing that I would make so many enemies. I had no idea that I wouldn't get the support that I expected from a country that says that it wants to put its children first and is known for putting its children first. So what we did was, when I stood outside the Catholic Church for 12 days, a meeting was set up. And again, that's where I got the compensation. It was only less than £100,000. But I'd been thinking about this for a very, very long time, about setting up my own group, Seek and Find Everybody Abused in Childhood. So the charity that I'd been with, that I'd turned to for help, I said to them, listen, if you come on the streets with us, we can go on the streets of Scotland. If we do 3 days in each town or city, we can do a publicity pile on day one, get all the media involved. The next day we'll get a lot of people coming, telling their stories. We can share our stories and share our testimonies about how we came off addiction, how we turned our lives around, how my amazing story of recovery and forgiveness, which so many people were happy to hear. And what we did worked, Emma. It worked. More and more people started coming forward, but more and more people started telling me, said, Dave, you've got to be so careful because you're revealing so much of what's been covered up for many years. And to a large extent, although I wasn't totally naive, the extent of what I found, even just in one day standing out in Glasgow or even Greenock, Stirling, any town or city, you could talk to between 50 and 100 people, Emma, who would tell you different things. And again, I started getting this picture and this sort of dictionary and map of the scale of paedophilia and child abuse in Scotland. Um, and again, the satanic ritual abuse thing started coming up. And this is what I was kind of focusing on because in 2012, I went to the papers and we'd got, I think it was 70 odd men came forward who had said they had similar things happen to them in St Ninians, the home where I was. And at least 8 that I can remember had said they too had gone through the exact same ritual abuses as I had. And as I told you as well, I would be sitting in my house, and I'd have people phoning me, and they would say, "My name's so and so. I'm up in Dundee. Well, I live in England," and people would tell me things about being put in coffins, and I would say, "Hang on a minute, let me," and I could ask them certain questions about their upbringing. How many times were they fostered out? Did they lose their parents? Had they been in the care system the whole year? And the pattern became very, very clear quite quickly that if you were an orphan or if you didn't go home at weekends and if you stayed at the homes, you were more likely to suffer more abuse, obviously. And we started getting this picture of whenever certain people came forward and mentioned certain names or certain places, I knew right away the size of the scale, and it became bigger and bigger. And then, as I say, I had people come up to me that I'd never met, strangers. "Dave, please be careful. You're talking about this place. You don't want to be doing that because people have died, people have disappeared." And this was regular. This was regular, but I believed, as I do to this day, I believe God had my back. I believe totally I was doing God's work. There's no doubt about it, and I still believe that to this day. Um, yeah, and we spoke to so many people. We walked into gay pride. We met so many gay people and all this transgender stuff. This is in 2018. And I'd never, ever been so far out my depth, Emma. I, you know, kids at 15 and 16 who had their thing cut off and then they'd had this and they were abused in childhood. They didn't know their sexuality, so they became gay. Then they wanted to be a woman. I couldn't work it out. It was just too much, mate. But I realised that this was something that had gone unaddressed for so long. So many people who had been abused in childhood, and that was the key to me, that everybody was lost. There didn't seem to be any direction for people who were sexually abused, especially in the care system. And that's the thing I was focusing on. And that's why I started S.A.F.E. And I started it with this charity. And we got some friends of mine, some other survivors. And we went to Glasgow, we went to Edinburgh, we went to Dundee, we went to other towns. And what we did worked, Emma. It worked. Now, what you got to understand is at this point, this is like 2018. So I'm 65 now. I'd spent 25, 30 years turning my life around after my wife had died. I've been campaigning all that time. I'd fitted in, tried to fit myself into society, getting a job, forming relationships has and always has been impossible. But I fitted in where I could. I had so many jobs, it was just incredible. And when I say I lived in more than 100 places, I don't mean more than 100 towns or cities. I mean, maybe in London, probably 50 places, bedsits, homeless centres, hostels, some of the most disgusting, frightening places you can imagine. In Northampton, where I had family, and I've still got family. And but yeah, it was now that I'd committed myself to S.A.F.E. And this is the life I wanted, because what happened is in 2015, I think I told you this, I had a breakdown. I had a quite serious breakdown where we were hearing about so many deaths. There was so much going on with other charities. There was so much going on with getting close to a child abuse inquiry being called. But yeah, the drug deaths was starting to rise. The suicides were rising. And again, nobody was associating this with child sex abuse. Only us, we knew it. We even now to this day, you very, very rarely get anybody mentioning connections between the drug deaths and child sex abuse, because in Scotland they just simply don't talk about it. So what we were doing is we were facing this head on. Let's go out the streets and talk about it. And this is what frightened people. This is what made people um, also respect us. An awful lot of people come up and say, we love what you're doing. That this is we need this, you know. I remember when I stood outside St Andrew's Cathedral, 2017. I was chained to a cross for 12 days, a 10-foot cross, and these people were coming over me and saying, "This is only on the second day, first and second day. Please don't go away. This is what we need. We need people like you. We need the survivors to work with us. We're all terrified to speak out. We're not allowed to speak out." And they were saying to us, it was just me, but please stay. We need this addressed. We want this addressed because we also want to get to heaven. And when we get to heaven, we don't want to have this burden on our shoulders. Did you do anything? What did you do to put my children first? But these people are under the not the sin, but the slaves to the church.
Well, the other thing, Dave, too, and you brought up a really good point about, you know, sort of like what speaking out does, how they try to discredit from, say, a higher perspective. The abusers try to discredit the victims and get people to turn away from them so they don't gain public support. And so what
Mhm.
that does too, the secondary part of that is it causes a ripple effect to survivors as an example that these abusers hold over them and say, if you speak out, this is going to happen to you. You better stay
Oh
quiet.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
then you get people who feel their only option is just to stay quiet. And so they internalize their story. They don't speak out. They feel hopeless. They fall into, really dark places in their lives, just like you did at times in your life. And I know that you'll talk about that with, addiction and things like that. It puts
yeah.
people in a really dark place. And that's why your work is so important because we need people that have the courage to speak out. And I know it's not always safe for everybody to speak out. It's not something everybody can do, but even people that can do it a lot of times don't because they're afraid to be that example and to go get hung,
Mhm.
just for speaking out by their abusers once again and to suffer that secondary abuse. So it's so important. And I love that you're getting all that validation because you deserve it. And that's something I've gotten so many people that have come on my podcast who said, "Hey, I listened to this person or I listened to that person and they inspired me to want to share my testimony." And
Yeah.
so you think if you and others had never spoken up, this would just remain a secret. It would be quiet. It would be silenced forever. We need the people like you on the ground, creating that hope and inspiration and giving people that courage. And I really feel that SAFE, that's a big side effect of SAFE is it is providing that to your country and to other people that find it. So I commend you for that, Dave.
Well, it's very important, Emma. And here's what I'll say: that yes, to God be all the glory, right? Amen. Absolutely, to God be all the glory. But here's the point: at some point you have to, and yeah, I'm not very good at blowing my own trumpet. I don't take praise very very well. I really don't. But what I like to talk about forgiveness, which is through Christ. But when you talk about recovery, that's a human thing. I had a very serious drug habit. I injected drugs every single day for 25 years. Yeah, and again, to God be all the glory. But at some point, yeah, and I've done this through Christian counselling and also seeing psychiatrists that say, listen, you did this, you did this. You're an example to others that they can do this. We're not all slaves to drugs and sin. We can overcome. We really can overcome anything, and the power is on the other side. When you walk with Christ, He doesn't heal all your wounds. He gives you a path, and He gives you the tools to do that. And it's by using those tools, which is your story. That's all it is. It's your story that's the powerful thing, and that's what scares people. That's what scares people who are know they're sinners and they know that they want. I do. I've had it many, many times, Emma, where I could be sitting in home and I live, and nobody knows where I live. My next door neighbour are sheep and cows. I live in the country. And sometimes I get a phone call, no caller ID, and they say, "Watch your back sharp. I know where you live." And sometimes I know that this is other survivors, and I know, and I've had people phone me up and say it, and I've met them on the street, and I said, "Did you call me?" What they're saying is, "I hate you because I wish I was with. I hate you because I wish I could do what you're doing." And I say, I get it, I get it. It's hard. You've no, and even when people say to me, I remember in 2011 when I first did this, and I live in my village, but one of my neighbours came across to my and they said, "Dave, there's a van outside your house. It's got a big satellite on the top. It's like a news thing." But what? No, I just did an interview with a Scottish TV station, and I went out, and it was Anglia Television, which is the regional TV. And then the next minute, yeah, we've been sent down from Scotland because they're the local for that station, and they come in my house, and they've got all these lights and lamps and cameras. It took over my whole house, and I thought, right, and I did an interview, and something happened, right? It's never happened before. And normally up to then, I always like to wear a shirt and tie. I wear jean top, and I always wear a cardigan. And something happened. They went away, and I went. And then the next day, I got up and I went to go out, and I went to my front door. And as I went to open it, I went, "Oh, hang on a minute. Everybody in the world knows who you are now. Your face is all over the newspapers." And I shut the door, and I thought, wow. And I got this thing where I couldn't leave the house for days. I think I went online to get shopping, and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. I said, "This is it. This is your new walk. Everywhere you go, people are going to want to know your story." But because you're talking about the Catholic Church and satanic ritual abuse, you're also going to get people. So you walk with fear as well. But again, it's about the armour of God. It's about walking in faith, and it's about walking in power of who you are inside. You know, these words that come out come from me through the Bible. You know, I walk through the Bible. It's the only way I can do this. I can't do it. So anyway, let's move forward to where I was on S.A.F.E. And what happened is one day, now this is what I want to explain to people because this is so important. You have to understand in a country like Scotland, how can somebody who's gone through all the trauma I've been through, 16 years in the care system, years in addiction, where my crime, I was going to show you my criminal record, which is no violence, nothing like that. It's a man who's lost, who, you know, shoplifting, drunk and disorderly, you know, and using drugs in public toilets and pubs and that, things like that. But to go from that, I want to try to explain to people how easy it is in society, a society that doesn't like to talk about child sex abuse, and a society that likes to take the guilt from them and put it on. It isn't just the church that does this, Emma. The church is very good at putting the blame and the guilt and the shame onto the survivor. But in society, especially a country like Scotland, we live in a country where, sorry, we just don't talk about that. Well, sorry, you have to. No, we don't. And if you want to fight, well, I'm going to make up these stories about you, and because I'm in a position of power and I can do that to you. And I say, well, hang on a minute, I'm a good guy. Why would you want to do this to me? And this is what's happening, and this is where we come against these forces that aren't necessarily what we know as evil in the sense of satanic ritual abuses, but it's just as abusive.
Absolutely. Yes. And you had talked last time about, getting that knock on your door and then being taken from your home and going to, having to being told that you're not going to be arrested to being
Yeah.
arrested and then having court, so I'm really eager too to hear how this sort of transpires because
and
it is like
and
a
how I be, and
spiral.
how I became the first person and the only person we think to ever go to prison without ever being interviewed by the police or a lawyer, and how even to this day, it's 18 months now since I came out of prison. 18 months later, I put my hand to God. I honestly, on my mother's grave, I still have no idea why I went to prison. I still don't know. So that's what I want to try and tell you what happened, because it's quite incredible. And then to then find, when I went into prison, there's dozens of Dave Sharps with the same story. And it's happening everywhere. These things we've got in Britain now with the riots, people getting put in court for putting things online. Well, sorry, welcome to our world, because that's been happening to survivors of child sex abuse for years. Nobody just listened to us. Everybody ignored us. And now it's happening to the rioters, rightly so. Sorry, not rightly so that they're getting saying that the riots were perfectly. I was with the riots, not there, but for what happened to those young girls, absolutely, absolutely. We know now, it's speculated that we were all lied to, and we'll find out more about that, because the truth will always comes out, Emma. And the way they treated some of these people, we've got one in Northampton, the MP's wife, who is a mother, and she's got cancer, and she's got a daughter, and she just lost a daughter, and yet they put her in prison for 2 years. Now, that's somebody who's carrying pain for a lost daughter, and she made a comment about the little girls that get murdered, and she got 2 years. Just, it's incredible. But the point is, and I don't want to, we know the lassie, and I pray for her and hope she does get out soon. But this has been happening to survivors of child abuse, not just in Scotland, all over the UK, especially with clergy abuse. I've been speaking about it lately with the Church of England, about the safeguarding things. But it's been happening for years, and everybody turned their back. And now people need to listen to these stories, because these people in positions of power need to be outed, and they need to be put in court. So what happened was, one day this woman, the chief executive, who we knew, she was constantly in fights with the government, the BBC, the this and that, she started taking objections to everything we were doing. Don't send them to the police. I don't like that. Well, hang on, we need to send them to the police. How are you going to get justice if you don't go to the police? Don't send them to the child abuse inquiry. Well, hang on, but and we're getting in a lot of conflict, and people were warning me, saying she's done a lot of bad things to staff members, a lot of bullying and stuff. I thought I was invincible, in the sense that I'm not doing anything bad or wrong. And the biggest benefit was that she was getting more clients, hundreds. The police were telling us, we're getting so many people coming forward now. We're arresting more paedophiles than in the last 10 years, because of the work you're doing. That's what the police said to me. And then the woman turned around to me and says, listen, our law firm, I want to bring our law firm with us on the streets. I thought, what a fantastic idea. So we got the survivors, us, sharing our testimony. We've got a child abuse charity with professional counsellors that people can register up and get healing and become clients. And at the same time, we've got a law firm that can offer legal advice. How awesome is that? Have you ever heard of that being done anywhere in the world? No, it never happened. Certainly not in Scotland anyway. It never happened, and it worked. It worked, and they were in the papers all the time. Then they were starting complaining. How come you're in the papers all the time? I said, well, hang on, because I'm organising it. And your name's on the brochures. Your charity's on the brochure. We're referring people. Why are you not happy with this? It was all crazy. And one day I got taken in a room, and she said, with a key worker, we've had a complaint that you threatened somebody. Now you need to leave. You can't do SAFE anymore, because it's in our name, or you can't use our name. You can't use our survivors, and don't talk to anybody ever again. Now get out. Hang on a minute. Excuse me. What do you mean? Who? What? We're not talking about it. Get out. I went, I don't understand. Who have I upset? What have I done? Within a week, I got this really ugly letter. If you contact anybody, we'll take you to court. You can't talk about the, but at the same time, I started getting these phone calls from all my friends in the charity survivors. Dave, we've been told if we talk to you, we're going to be kicked out. I thought, that's terrible. And some people did get kicked out. But then I started getting phone calls from members of staff talking about how they were getting treated. I said, have you gone to the police with this? And it got that bad, I had to phone another survivor group, tell them about survivor group, because some of these women's stories were so bad about the way they were being treated, I didn't know what to do with them. So I got this other charity to help us. And I was getting these phone calls all the time. People phoning me and saying, people screaming down the phone, you effing shut up. And what? Calm down. I was in Dundee and you gave me a leaflet and you told me this law firm was only going to charge 10%. Now they're telling me they're charging me 25%. You rip off, and I'm getting the blame now. And I'm saying, hang on a minute, I'm not with them anymore. Yeah, I knew you'd say that. You wait, we're going to get you. And this, and everything was coming on me. And I was going to the police, I was telling the police, and I got taken in a room by a Scottish run organisation called Future Pathways, which helps survivors. Also gives out all the funding for the different charities. And I was taken there and they said, listen, you need to report this. You need to report this to the authorities. We'll give you an advocate. We'll also give you a counsellor to help you. So that was fine. And that went on for almost a year. And then after a year, I'm sitting at home. One day, my door goes. Open the door. There was 7 o'clock in the morning, two police officers. Dave, you need to come with us up to Scotland. I said, well, sorry, what? You're okay. You're not in any trouble. You just need to come with us. And it'll take us 4 or 5 hours to get there. You don't need to bring a change of clothes or anything. We'll sit you down. Some people want to talk to you, and then we'll bring you home. I thought, no, hang on. Something not right here. Then I said, okay, I'll go with it. Okay. So I got in the car. Wow. Well, I got up to Scotland at the border. And even on the way up, I knew something wasn't right, Emma. And I said to these guys, there was two, they were young enough to be my children. And I said to these guys, I said, listen, you need to be very, very careful what you're doing here. You need to be careful, put me in a cell. I said, also, I've had insomnia my whole life. I don't take any medication, but I have to take Zopiclone for my insomnia. I've got really bad insomnia. And also, you need to make sure there's an appropriate adult there. Because I told them about getting put in coffins and what happens when I'm in the dark. Yeah, that's all right, that's fine. So I went up to this police station. They took me in and took me to the desk, and this sergeant said, right, we're going to take your fingerprints first. I said, hang on a minute, why do you want to take my fingerprints if I'm not being under arrest? We need to take your fingerprints. And at that point, I took my hearing aids out, and I said, right, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to say anything or do anything until I see a doctor. I'm not going to do anything at all. So they grabbed me, turned me around, put me in a cell, stripped me naked, put this suit thing on me, and left me there for 16 hours. And at 8 o'clock at night, in between that 16 hours, the door went, and they said, the doctor's here to see you. So I went and seen this doctor guy, and I said to this doctor, before you do or say anything, sir, can I just ask you to Google Dave Sharp Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry? So he did it, and the first thing he said to me was, have you been allocated an appropriate adult? I said, no. I said, I haven't seen anybody. I said, I haven't had a cup of tea, nothing, just left in there. So I went back in, and these two police officers are in there. He said, are you ready to talk? I said, I think you better go and talk to the doctor. So they went out, and that was it, nothing, till 7 o'clock the next morning. Now, see, during the night, Emma, let me tell you about insomnia. During the night, wow, just, I'm sitting in this cell, and all of a sudden, these blue arrows flying across the room. And every so often, these blue arrows would come into me and hit me and just knock me for six. And I sat there all night. Every time I blinked, a train went by, and I'd try to jump in front of it, and I couldn't. Just, and obviously, you don't know when. And the more you think about blinking, the more it actually happens. And in my mind, all I can see is bridges. Now I've got, and I'm picturing And I've got them all on my phone. That's why I'm on suicide watch now. Repeatedly, I think about jumping off bridges, and this is where Kevin comes in when I heard Kevin's story, Kevin Sutherland, where it's hit me so much. And also one of the things, I don't know how much you know about this, but a lot of survivors of child sex abuse, especially satanic ritual abuse, where in the background there's a lot of fires. I do think a lot about setting myself on fire. I have done most of my life. And even during this first time, before this happened, I'd contacted a lot of people, including these charities and other people, saying, listen, you need to let these people know, this charity, you need to stop this. That you have to understand, somebody who's carried so much trauma to then have to live with false allegations on top, you have to understand you're playing a really, really dangerous game here. And again, going back to Kevin Sutherland, this is the tipping point. Kev was at that tipping point, and so many survivors in that tipping point. And again, this is what I was saying about how many we know, you'll be the same, who commit suicide or overdose just because it's the only way out. And especially in Scotland, where we know a lot of people, and when we start saying, hang on a minute, why are you not going back in the page? Go back a page in that life and actually talk about what he really died with, because he couldn't cope with the child abuse. That's when he was crying out to have his voice heard, and you all turned your back on him because none of you are able, and you're too scared to talk about this. And these people here, like these charities, are getting thousands and thousands of pounds, and they can do what they want to people like us, and they're getting away with it because nobody cares. So as you know, I went the next morning. I got taken to another police station where they told me that an allegation had been made that I had assaulted this chief executive, a woman. I threw her to the ground and physically assaulted her. I was in shock, total shock. And it's where did this happen? It says Dundee. My first thought was, well, you must have CCTV. So this is obviously this woman's deluded. And then I went to court. I got bail. I came out of the court. I was in the cell, and the police came in and said, "We're keeping your telephone." I thought, that's great. Yeah, because if you keep my telephone, then nowadays you can put a gadget on the phone and you can download everything within 30 seconds now. And I thought, this time tomorrow, these guys are going to be coming at my door saying, "We're really, really sorry. We've arrested the wrong person because I never did this. And there's nothing in my phone. There's nothing in my computer. I'm a good person." End of. But it never happened. And then what happened was, then I'm waiting months. I contacted the lawyer again. I said, "Listen, can we sit and talk about this case? Can you send me the evidence against me? Can we sit and talk about how I can build a case for myself? I'm too busy just now." And I was phoning the police. I said, "Listen, I need somebody to talk to me about this." I forgot to mention, this is just when the pandemic started as well. So, but the pandemic kind of eased out. And I'm saying, "Can I come up for a meeting? Why is nobody asking me for my side? What's happening to me? Who wants to listen to me? I never did this. And now I've got all this other evidence again to show that this woman's done all this before. And I've got psychiatric reports. I've got all kinds of stuff." And also this other charity, these charities who are Scottish run, the Future Pathways, they were the ones that were guiding me all along here. And just before the court case, they disappeared. "We can't represent you anymore because we're the Scottish government. We can't be seen." I said, "Well, you've advised me all the way here." Anyway, it came to the court case, and I'm saying, "Why? No, sorry. What happened was, because I hadn't got anywhere with the police or the lawyer in almost a year, I thought, this is crazy. What's going on here?" And people were telling me, "Dave, you got to be careful, mate. They're going to use you. You're going to be used as an example." I said, "Hang on a minute. What do you mean? I've not been in any trouble for 30 years. My wife died in my arms. I spent years in care, being sexually abused. What's the worst thing that can happen to me? What are we talking about here? Because I'm a good guy. I've not done anything deliberately to hurt anybody." And all of a sudden, Emma, I felt like I had this gun to my head. And everybody, from the police to the lawyer to the judge, everybody, it felt like everybody who was supposed to help people like me were all queuing up to pull the trigger. And I thought, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. So I thought, I've got to do something here. So I decided I'm going to go up to the police station where arrested me, Falkirk, where the lawyer also happened to work. And I decided I'm going to stay there for 5 days and 5 nights. And I put a big banner, stop trying to cover up child sex abuse. Something like that. Stop trying to silence survivors of child sex abuse. And I stuck it on the police station. And I stayed there. I'd be lying if I stayed there every night because it was really, really pouring the rain. One night I slept in the graveyard across the road and I almost drowned because all the ground was all soaking wet. But on the third or the fourth day, my phone went and it was the lawyer. He said, I've got some good news for you. I said, oh yeah, what's that? He says, the Procurator Fiscal have said they're going to drop the assault charge. I said, well, of course he is, because it never happened. He said, but only on the condition you must plead guilty to lesser charges of sending menacing text messages. Now, remember the very first time I've only met this guy once in over a year in the police station. And he told me then, I've seen all your text messages. There's nothing threatening in them. So this time now he's telling me, if you plead guilty to the text messages, you'll probably just get a slap in the wrist. I said, no, what do you mean? No. I said, I don't have a criminal record. You know, like once after a certain while, your criminal records, it's called spent. So it's nearly 30 years. I've got no. I said, no, listen, why don't you listen to me? At what point do I? No, you don't have to do that. No, listen, I don't have to have a criminal record. I don't want a criminal record. Oh, well, it's up to you. You do what you want. Hang up. And I kept on phoning his office, getting his secretary. I said, listen, you've got to talk to me here. The court case is coming up soon. You have to tell me what I'm pleading guilty to. What is it I'm actually being guilty to? Because sending menacing text messages isn't a crime. You have to specify. Now, what they had done is, these people had manipulated all these text messages to their own advantage. When I'm talking about setting myself on fire, it's a cry for help. We spoke about this last week, about when people who go on to commit heinous crimes in adulthood, it usually happens because something happened in their childhood. Emma, I was terrified that because of the so much stuff I'd suffered as a child, now this was triggering me. I was waking up during the night screaming this woman's name. But the next day I was phoning and emailing the lawyer, Nicola Sturgeon, Hamza Yusuf, all the people in positions of power. Please help me. I don't want to be another start of suicide or a drug death or end up in prison for life because I've hurt somebody. I don't want to do that. And I was very, very open about it. These people manipulated it. So when it came to the time of the court case, I've turned up to the court case. I had no idea. So I've got shirt and tie on, everything. And I walked into the court, and this guy came over. He says, come into the room. Now, this is only the second time I've ever met this guy. First time was almost 2 years ago. And he says, right, how are you pleading? Guilty or not guilty? And I said, tell me what I'm pleading guilty to, please. And he went, right, if that's the bit you want to do, come on then. And I went, what? Hang on. And he walked out. I took my tie off. I threw it on the floor. What's going on here? So I walked into the court, and when I'm in the court, I couldn't hear because it's a huge big place. But the lawyer's there, and he's saying, this is what I'm hearing. Go easy on this one, Your Honour. Another child sex abuse survivor, but this one's had it a bit worse than most. He's had a really bad life. So go a bit easy. So as far as I remember now, I've stood up and went, hang on a minute. When do I get to speak? And the judge went, Mr. Sharp, sit down in my court. I said, but Your Honour, I haven't done anything. I've told you, be quiet. So the lawyer said something else, and I stood up again. So then this is important, what happened next. The judge then turned round to the prosecution side, and he said, remind me again what this man was originally charged with. Now, this woman started reading out what this CEO, the original charge. I've never seen this. I've never read it. Oh, this is serious, Your Honour. On the 18th of April 2018, this man seriously assaulted this disabled pillar of the community that she was terrified to leave her house for days and weeks. And I thought, hang on a minute. What? I said, no, hang on a minute. That's not the judgment. That's it. I've heard enough. Sharp, 60 days in prison. I stood there. Do you know what I did? Do you know what I did? Peed myself. I just peed myself. I couldn't what? 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 No psychiatric report, no interview, nothing. You're a piece of dirt. How could you do that? I remember as well, Emma, when I was at the court, there was a lot of young kids there that were up before me. There was one kid there who looked like he'd been smoking heroin for the last 48 hours. He couldn't even put his head up. And I watched this guy getting carried in, and the same lawyer, I watched this young kid getting taken up to the dock, and this judge was shouting at him. And he got, I don't know what the sentence was, and I thought, whoa, that's a bit harsh. Should he be? This is the Scottish justice system. This is how bad it is. And again, it goes back to the point where I've been saying for a few times now, you can go on Twitter and read a lot of Scottish lawyers' statements where they say, oh, I had another kid today and he was sexually abused as a child, but I didn't know what to do to help him, and he's gone. He got 16 or 18 months in prison. I thought, what do you mean you didn't know what to do? Where's your heart? So they took me out, put me in this van. I was taken to the police station, the prison, Low Moss near Glasgow. 40 years has I been in prison. 40 years. Wow. The guy says to me, he says, are you feeling suicidal? I went, you bet. You bet. Yeah, very. So they put me in this room, this cell, and they get one of this, like before, the metal suit thing. And I got left there for 5 days and 5 nights. And as soon as I went in, you've got a bed and a desk that's nailed, it's concreted to the wall. And I went straight under the concrete bed. I didn't go into bed because I was terrified. Every time the door went, I thought that they were going to come in and rape me. I'd gone straight back to being the 12-year-old child that was in the care home. And at night time, all the screams, Emma, were exactly the same as in the children's home. So I stayed under the desk. That's where I stayed, slept there, just stayed there. And when they came in for 5 days, I didn't eat a single thing. I just drank water, didn't have nothing. And and again, this one woman kept coming in, prison officer, and I says to her, I says, can you please ask not that 2 or 3 men don't come in at one time, because it's, and I told her, it's triggering me, it's making me feel really bad. I think I'm going to get raped. And she went, no, I'll have a word. So it was calmed down. So after the 5 days, I was taken up to the headquarters of the wing, where the chief commander is with the stripes. And there was a few people in this room. There was 2 mental health nurses, mental health nurses, social workers, stuff like that. And the chief guy said, he says, right, he says, I know who you are, you're Dave Sharp. He said, I know what you do as well. You're he had, I think, I can't remember, I think he had the screen one of my campaigns. He said, I have to tell you something, Dave. I said, what's that? He says, in here, you can't talk about child sex abuse. I said, what? I said, what do you mean? He says, Dave, we've got too many survivors. We don't have the resources or the staff to deal with it. And I said, that's exactly what I've been talking about for the last 40 years. This is everything I've been campaigning about. And I looked up to the house. I said, God, this is why you put me in here, to expose this. He says, you cannot talk to anybody. I said, listen, do you understand? I have nothing else in my life other than this existence. Every day of my life, I talk about and meet survivors of child sex abuse. That's all I know. He's all telling you that blah, blah, blah. So I got put in a cell under the guy and for a couple of days. And then they put me in my own cell. That was when all hell broke loose. It's just satanic stuff, just the attacks. And I started going under the bed and all things. And my 12-year-old child now, who I've had a great relationship all my life, and he's, oh, you got to get me out here. You've got to end this, and I can't cope. And I just couldn't. The screams, and then every night you hear crying in the next cells and things. And again, it was just like being exactly in the home. So I devised this plan. I started going all the bins and collecting all the face masks that people had thrown away. And then I started ripping them up and then making a noose. And in the top of the cell, there was a little pin for where the water sprinkler. And I tied a noose and tied on it and jumped, and it broke. Then I tried it again, because every time you leave your cell, you've got to have your mask on. If you've not, you've got to go and get one at reception. So every day I'd deliberately leave it so that I could get more. And then I'd find places like the kitchen where there's no cameras, and I would ask people in their cells, "Oh, I'm trying to make a thing at that game, you know that game. So can you save your face mask for me?" I was making up all these excuses to get people's face masks, because at the same time as well, Emma, almost every other person I met had the same story. It's about child sex abuse. And one of the guys came over, he said, "My wife's a social worker." He said, "I had a visit yesterday, she was talking about you, and she said she met you at a conference in Scotland today with child sex abuse. And he said, nobody here is going to harm you, you're going to be fine, everybody knows who you are, so don't worry about anybody, you know." And I was treated great by all the prisoners, you know. But having said that, I just really had nothing in common with anybody, Emma. Nothing. Relationships have always been too hard. Again, this is the thing that hurts me about with this charity, because I went to this charity with these things in mind about getting this kind of help I needed, you know, and then to be in the position. And what happened was I was in, I got taken out quite a bit, and there was a lot of prison officers would sit me down and ask me questions, say, we're getting all this, and what's your view? And they wanted to know everything I knew, which I was happy to talk about. And the two mental health nurses, two women, took me in the room, and this woman said to me, she says, "Dave, I've been here for so many years." She says, "We see the same people coming in again and again and again." And I said, "This is what we've been talking about. So many people who were sexually abused as children, predominantly in the care system, and they're going through the revolving doors of addiction, crime, prison, and then early deaths. And a lot of these people as well, Emma, they go on to have children themselves who can't function in these dysfunctional families, and then they end up in the care system and they get abused, and we just have it just goes on and on and on and on."
You had mentioned a very shocking statistic. I believe 65 to 75% of all inmates are abuse survivors, correct?
That's right. That's been a fact in Scotland for over 50 years, for the reasons I told you last week, predominantly to do with people, so many people being in the care system. And as Lady Smith herself said, the chair of the inquiry said, she said, "For the last 50 years, you, Scotland, turned your back on these children." And I say, what she didn't mention was, well, while we were all being abused, our families were all being threatened by the authorities and by the Catholic Church. And they'd never learned how to deal with that. And again, that's why so many people, it's easy for so many people to abuse and exploit. And these people I've told you about, I can't get into too much detail. One of the things we want to do now, Emma, is we want to look at a lot of these criminal lawyers who, when you're talking about these people who were sexually abused as children, who end up going through the revolving doors of prison, we want to get some of these law firms and ask them three simple questions. Did I talk about this last week? No? No, these people, these lawyers who are dealing with these people who were sexually abused as children, right? Who are getting in and out. See, a lot of these people, what happens is, when you, like me, the exact same. As soon as I came out of the care home after 16 years, the first thing I went to a doctor and I said, "Listen, I've been sexually abused," and he gave me a script. He didn't refer me to any help. He just gave me a script, which started 25 years of addiction, and this is what they still do now. And what we're saying is, when that person now, and I'm talking about me and thousands of others, when you go back and say, "Listen, I thought you gave me these drugs, I thought they were going to help me stop me up the nightmares for the ritual abuses." I thought they were going to help me fit into society. I thought they were going to help me to be a person that can actually function normally just like everybody else. But what you've done is you've sent me backwards downhill to a life of where I'm a social misfit, I'm a social outcast. Now, the only thing they do from there is the addiction then falls into illegal drugs. And then the addiction gets bigger and bigger, and then they have to rely on crime. Now, when these people go to these lawyers and they say, listen, I was sexually abused, oh, it's okay, don't matter. You'll only get a fine. So they get a fine. And then when they get out of court, what do? They get back to the same thing over and over and over again. Now, we'd like to get hold of some of these lawyers and say, listen, 3 questions. What age did your client start offending? Did your client mention they were sexually abused as children? And 3, what did you do about it? I think you would open up a huge, huge, huge big can of a big can of worms. I know people now who the only people on their Christmas card list is their lawyer because they've got no families. We hear these stories all the time. You know, I've not got any family. I've tried to work with my family, but there's so many people who live in these bedsits and hostels and just go through life having nothing, just surviving. You know, because we're not able to talk about this subject. And we have to. We have to find a way of opening up, you know. And again, now for the last 10 years, we've had the same problem now going on to the grooming gangs, which even 10 years ago I was talking about with the Afghanis in Glasgow. Because as I say, the same thing they have in common is, and one of these things with the Rochdale things, is the only one thing in common is most of these children were all in the care system. You know, a high percentage of them were in the care system. And for me personally, as a child abuse campaigner, you imagine the horrors of going through as a campaigner of historical child abuse, institutional abuse, to then all of a sudden we've got this new religion storming the country, and these guys are grabbing our children and abusing them all over again. And you're not allowed to say anything. Then you start to understand how many people were actually involved in me getting sent to prison. We had people here who make thousands and thousands of pounds out of childhood trauma conferences, and they won't talk about child sex abuse because it doesn't fit their agenda. I had this man phone me up. He said, listen, you've got to stop talking about child sex abuse. I said, excuse me? Who the hell are you? I knew who he was. He said, you've got to stop talking about it. You're making everybody feel uncomfortable. I said, what? I said, I've been doing this was a couple of years ago. I've been doing this for nearly 30 years. Nobody's ever spoke to me like this. How dare you? Who's your boss? He said to me, be very, very careful who you speak to, because I know people in very high places. These are the people that are running childhood trauma conferences in Scotland. We now have a thing called the Promise. The Promise it was set up to help people in the care system. It started off, it was called the Care Review. It took 4 years to build it. Spoke to over 5,000 people who were in the care system. Part of the things we were promised was that they would do everything they could to talk to as many survivors of child sex abuse as they could, so that we could all know and work together to make sure no kid ever goes through what we went through. So far, after 4 years, there was a conference earlier this year. We all went to the conference. Nothing was told about child sex abuse. A lot of good things have been done about other stuff, adoption and various other things to do with people who've left care, but nothing. The subject of child sex abuse, we were all lied to, completely lied to. And these same people knew I didn't do these things. The promised they were going to be there for all of us, and they let us all down, the sex abuse survivors. We had a child abuse inquiry now. It's been going now since 2017. We know there's no question that the cover-ups is just so obvious. I could name you 5 or 6 very high-profile cases in Scotland where dozens of men and couples, nuns and priests and what have you, who were named, and twice as many survivors came forward. in my one case, 70 men, as I told you, the one that it was involved in my home. But when it came to the child abuse inquiry, it was only like 30 odd people. And some of them were teachers and cleaners. So there's only a handful of actual survivors that were handpicked for each different section. The cover-ups is so obvious. It's not what's in it, it's what's not in it that's there. And of course, we have this book now that's come out where a lawyer who's involved with the child abuse inquiry has wrote a book saying that at least 2 of the lawyers have committed suicide because they couldn't handle living with the cover-ups. That's an incredible statement. The book's by a guy called John Haley, Halley. His Twitter account is Advocate Haley. You can catch him on Twitter. And the book's called A Judicial Monstering. And it's just quite incredible, the details of, and when we speak about the magic circle, which is kind of central to a lot of things that happened in Scotland, this magic circle, which you've got up there, yeah, that we know. I mean, I know, even the lady there that you've put up, she was the daughter of one of the lawyers, and she was told she wasn't allowed to go to the inquiry. So many people who had important stories to tell about these big high-profile cases. But even when the BBC and Channel 4 and all these people did all these documentaries, it was I don't swear, it was a massive cover-up. These reporters, these newspaper reporters knew exactly what they were doing. 25% of the truth is what they told. And again, most of the victims were in the care system. So well covered up. And again, people like myself, I'm not saying love me, I'm great. I don't like being in this public position. I don't like having all the attacks I have. I don't like the fact that I've now got a criminal record. But I came forward because I had to come forward. And the attacks I got from all these people that know that almost everything I was saying was true, that everything I was talking about all these cases was all true. Everybody knew that. But again, it was easier to silence me than to actually come out and sit me down with the other people and say, listen, we need to open this up. We need to open up and have a national conversation about this, because this is all, the whole thing's been covered up from start to finish. So it is. It's an actual paedophile ring that was running in Scotland. The actual details, it's very, very difficult to actually know exactly what happened, because it was an expert job. It was covered up by judges and lawyers about what actually happened. There's so many different stories that whatever story or whatever version I give you, you guaranteed there'll be people saying, no, that's not what really happened. It's very, very easy to distort the truth. Again, because the amount of people who, it's easier to come out with different versions and distort the truth, which makes people like me not just liars, but as one of the, what was the word now? Hang on a minute. I've been called, what was it called again? Not a lost cause. I've been called that many things. But again, we know it's there. Most of us know most of the survivors that were involved. But if you actually watch the documentary, even some of the police officers, and this is where you get most of the information from, Emma, when you're on the streets with the police officers on the streets, that they're the ones that will actually tell you. And the documentary exposed that very clearly, that some of these police officers that were involved in this saying, that nothing like the real truth came out. So it's really, really nasty the way they did it. And again, with somebody like me, what they did, and this is, I had no idea. I had no idea that everything that happened to me since the allegations was all plotted. That when I was called a stalker, for example, I thought, stalker? How can I be a stalker when I had the Scottish Government's own team, Future Pathways, and the National Confidential Forum, Professor, what was her name? Forget the lady's name now. They people told me, we're going to be here for you. We're going to guide you through this. We're going to give you an advocate. We're also going to give you I had a counsellor for I don't know how long. But then this woman who made the accusations against me was allowed to go to all the papers and say, this man's been stalking me for years. But that's just not true. But again, it's all about discrediting, isolating, humiliating. They destroyed my name. They destroyed my reputation. But again, the Emma, the truth always comes out. And what we're hearing now, especially with this Rochdale thing and so many other things now, it's only a matter of time. It really, really is. Just slowly and slowly, things are happening. Sometimes it happens at a fast pace, like now with this grooming gang thing. But the only thing is with this grooming thing, it's the same mistakes over and over again. As soon as anybody comes out and becomes a high profile campaigner, all the other campaigners or all the other, what do you call these people? The conspiracy theorists.
Oh, okay.
All the conspiracy theorists or all the other people, the amount of people who have come up to me and said, Dave, I want to work with you. Tell me what you know. Or you need to work with us because we know more than you and we'll be able to help each other. All this kind of stuff that you get. And everybody will do anything to be the number one. But I've never had any notion or thing made to be the number. Oh, I did. I got my compensation. I set up my S.A.F.E just to encourage people to come forward and have their voices heard. I'm not Labour. I'm not Conservative or SNP. I'm none of that. And I'll tell you why very quickly. In Scotland, what I found very, very quickly when I was campaigning, this is like even years ago, I would get phone calls and emails from people who had been sexually abused in the care system. Now, they would tell me, I'm an addict or I'm an alcoholic. I live in a bedsit in Glasgow and I'm SNP. Nicola Sturgeon's my hero. And I want independence and they're going about what they believe in, right? And I fully support you, Dave, and I want to join your campaign, and I can't wait when you come up again. Can I come and see you, and can we go for it? Yeah, and I've done all that. I would never ever do anything to upset that relationship. Now, on the other side, I've got lots of people who are conservative or other, and they say Nicola Sturgeon, she's this evil, this that, and that, and then Dave, I love what you're doing. So that's why I'm not political. I don't have any political allegiance. Of course, I'm annoyed at the way people do things, but I don't come out supporting any party for that reason, because survivors are survivors. We're survivors, full stop. Survivors United, not Survivors United in Labour.
Well, yeah, and
You
it
know?
does a disservice to these testimonies. Like, there's been people who have accused me of being political, and they're like, oh, you must be a Democrat or you must be a Republican because you're talking about
Yeah,
this. No, like, let's not politicize children, because I have
exactly.
survivors that have conservative parents and liberal parents. There is no political party that pedophilia
Yeah,
belongs to. It doesn't affiliate with politics. It's not religious. It's not political.
yeah,
We need to get away from that and focus on the children, because
yeah,
we
exactly.
make it political. We
Yeah,
divide each other and we're fighting each other instead of fighting the perpetrators.
yeah. Put God's children first.
Yeah.
That this is all about, and this is why I'm saying I know that I've never done anything to deliberately misinterpret it or to upset people. I've had a lot of people threats, and they've said, you need to, and this particular group that have forced things down me, like some satanic stuff and some of this sort of conspiracy theories, but they're very, very quick to detect, don't you think? They're very, very, I'm not stupid, Emma. I might not be intellectual, I might not be academic, but I'm streetwise. One of the things a lot of people say to me, Dave Sharp, he's a good guy, but he's so naive. Well, of course I'm naive. I spent 16 years, my whole childhood, locked up in the care system. Of course I'm naive. I spent the next 25 years on the street, fighting, running away from the threats of my abusers. I remember when I started working, I tried to fit back into society, and I tried to get a job, and I found that I couldn't get a job in a room with two or three people, because if you just keep talking about all I talk about, they're not going to last half a day. It doesn't matter what job you get. People, because it might be my DID, dissociation, it might be my ADHD, my attention deficiency, or CPTSD. I carry all these different personality disorders and stuff. What I had to do was, the only way I could get a job, Emma, was to look specifically for call centre work, and specifically for someone that was looking for 25, 30 people that involved, maybe it was O2 or a big the phone companies, or Barclays, Nationwide, banks, or first line call centre, so that when you go for the interview, they just want you, and you can basically, I was going to use a B word, lie your way through it. I was going to say BULL, but they just tell the basics, and because they need so many people that no matter what you say, you'll get in anyway. So just try and, and then once you get in there, then you've got to go through the induction process, but it could last a week or 2 weeks. But then when you get into there, there's usually two trainers. Usually it's probably like two limp-wristed guys who love world and love a big joke, and Will's just a big laugh. And we're going to have so much fun over the next 2 weeks. We're going to be your trainers. And you're sitting there and they'll say, right, we'll invite you up one at a time. Tell us a bit about yourself. What am I going to say? Huh? What am I going to say? When I step up to that stage, there's 50 people there. Most of them know each other because it's from the same town. I don't know anybody. Am I going to stand up and say, my name's Dave Sharp, I'm a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. I was brought up in the care systems. They're going to go, oh, he's a charmer, isn't he? I hope I'm not sitting next to him. So quite often you'd find you'd have to make stuff up. Then that's when you talk about the lying, how you need to learn how to lie for a living just to fit into places. And it becomes so difficult. Because once you start lying, you've got to remember that. And then what happens is, and this is the other thing about being what's the word I'm looking for? When you're an underclass, when you're a lower level academically, what's the word I'm looking for? See, because I never had any education, I don't know big words. This is where I struggle when I'm being interviewed. I don't speak a lot of, I'm not eloquent or anything like that. And inferior complex, that's what I was looking for. You naturally suffer from an inferior complex. And again, when I was talking to the psychiatrist about for this court case, any court case that's coming up, I spoke about this, about how with this chief executive of this charity, I feared her. I was terrified of her. To think I would attack her, it'd be like saying I'm going to attack one of the priests that abused. Well, it just wouldn't happen. I'm not that character, Emma. I haven't got it in me. And it's clear to anybody, once you meet me and talk to me, I'm the last person in the world that would hit a woman. It's just because I've got so much trauma and so much stuff that's happened, and there's so much other things going on in my life, just so focused on surviving and helping other survivors and sharing my story, that it's just almost impossible. But this person knew what she was doing. These professional narcissist. And it's so easy. And that's why, again, when I was talking recently with the Church of England, I was invited to go and meet some safeguarding officers. I was invited to go and meet some safeguarding officers recently at Church of England, and there was 3 women there. And I said to this woman, what's the most important thing for you, do you think, to help survivors of clergy abuse? And she says, oh, I have to be trauma-informed. I said, hang on a minute. If I want my trauma dealt with, I'll go and see a trauma expert. But I'm in the church talking to you. I want to talk about my relationship with the church and with God and with Jesus. That's the direction I want to go in. I want a safeguarding officer that's going to say to me, listen, let's talk about your relationship with the church. Let's talk about your relationship with Jesus. Let's see what we can do to help you walk with us on the path with Christ, as St. Paul talks about in the Acts. Let's do it that way. Oh, right, I get you. Because you can tell in a second when you meet a safeguarding officer, you can tell in 1 second whether they're a slave to the church or a servant of Christ. You can tell in a second. And then with this woman, I had this relationship where she seemed to always, my faith seemed to trouble her quite a bit. She said, because I was giving my testimony all the time and it seemed to trouble her. And I noticed this quite a bit, that where, yeah, it was quite troubling for her. But yeah, again, it's, I mean, I don't wish her any harm. But again, we have to talk about this because these sort of things can't keep going on. They can't. We have to find a way to create an environment where people can feel safe to come forward. And I've been invited back down to the safeguarding people and talking in that training, which I'm trying to focus just on Scotland, and I'm trying not to do any interviews with the press or anything like that. I don't want to do that. I want to focus on this, what we're doing now, Emma. I think it's very, very important that you know, as I said earlier on before, I'm not an expert on satanic ritual sex abuse, but I'm a lifelong expert on the suffering and the trauma of satanic ritual sex abuse, and that's what needs to be spoke about. You know, I don't want to be an activist. I don't want to be a rebel. You know, I don't want to be anti anything. It's just pro children, and you know, and we've been talking a lot about the difference between, you know, when you're abused by satanic ritual abuse by the priests, it's Satanism. But when the Muslims, the grooming gangs abuse the children, it's evil. Why is that? What is sorry? What is what is the difference? Why do we label it different? You know, it's where some of the evil that they're inflicting on children is, well, there is, you can't compare evil, can you? Really? You know, I know for a fact that a lot of people, lawyers especially, would talk about the Christian Brothers. We spoke about this last week, how out of all the religious groups, they were the most evil. They inflicted a lot of violence, and that's why when Lady Smith, the chair of the child abuse inquiry, when she did her summing up on the home we were in, the boys' home, St Ninians, she went down various names and she spoke about the abuse they suffered. But when it got to me, she only did one paragraph. Dave Sharp suffered some of the most horrific physical and sexual abuse violence I've ever heard of. That was it. She couldn't even speak about it. Now, whether that was because it was too painful or whether it was what we think to cover up the satanic, which just never got a mention. So again, when we first started this whole conversation, when we decided to talk about this a few months ago, we were saying it's not a case of, we're not here to get people to believe what I'm saying. We're here to get people to help us join the dots, because there's so many other people who have gone through the same stuff, you know? And I right now, I don't see anything that's going to stop our children going through the same stuff that we went through. And I can't rest at that. I can't rest at that. I can't. I really can't. The case you've got up there is the case with the young boy he's in a grave. He's in a grave in Scotland, where he's on top of him is a priest, and underneath him is a priest, Alexander. This is the story I was following for years. Somebody told me about this years ago, and I started investigating, and I found his grave in St Ninians, in the church, and there's a grave there where there's a priest, a Christian brother at the bottom. Then there's Alexander, who was only 14, in the middle, and then another priest on the top in one grave. And we found out, and I found his family, and his auntie and his mother. I think his mother died, but his auntie was saying that they desperately wanted the body back to where they lived in Scotland. But what the Christian Brothers had done is they did it. It was 100 years. What's the word? 100 years lease. So the grave can't get dug up for 100 years. So what are they covering up?
That's the question. And again, your story and what you've been whistleblowing on behalf of others, and we could say the same for Kevin's story, reveals a massive network of people working together consistently for years and years, generations and generations, and it's passed down to the next people in line that take their places, is covering this up and making sure that the network doesn't get exposed. And they do that by silencing people like you, like Kevin, and all these other survivors that come forward, and they keep these stories on purpose out of the public eye. They discredit, they gaslight. But you really see whenever you listen to these testimonies how big this problem is, not just with survivors, but with the people involved. You have all these children, but then there's all these adults that are working together, whether it's at a school, whether it's in court. There's all these adults that are working together to make
Yeah.
sure that these victims remain victims and that they continue to be abused and never taken seriously by the public. It's a huge problem.
There's a lot of people, Emma. There's a lot of people that you're just talking about, right? And this is what hurts me. It does really hurt me. There's a lot of people right now in Scotland who have got jobs and they've got maybe a 10-year mortgage and they're sleeping very well, thank you very much, doing work that it's exploiting and abusing children all over again. And they know they are. They know they are. We get these every not every year. Well, it's quite often we get these. Yeah, that's the gravestone there. Yeah, I've got to go up there one more time before I die. I've got to go up one more time and just say goodbye to him because his family's all gone now, as far as we know. But yeah, that story lived with me for years. I've been up a few times when I go up there, and I did a radio interview. I think it was last year or the year before. And but yeah, it touches. These things stay in your heart, Emma. They really do. There was in total there was 3 boys that died, and one got taken home. His body got taken home, and the other one we couldn't find. There was one who disappeared, who died, but there's no records, nothing, no records. Now you can hide child abuse, but to hide a death that's when you're going into the satanic. That's when you're going into the realm of again. But the thing is, we never ever see any reporters coming forward saying, "I'd love to investigate this." I'd love to investigate more into what happened to the children. With all these court cases, all these big court cases that come up, as I say, sometimes it starts with 70, 80, 100 children, men or women, sorry, who were abused as children. And then by the time it gets to court, it's maybe 10 or 12. But nobody ever stops and thinks, I hope the other people that came forward, I hope they got the support they needed. Because the truth is, they don't. We know they don't. We know that. I had one case, and I could sit here all night telling you cases like this. I told you about the guy in America, in Canada, his brother. Well, I had another case where a guy contacted me in Glasgow, and the guy told me that he went through ritual abuse. He was part of the castle paedophile ring. He got taken to the castle. He told me, he said, I remember in the morning sitting at a great big giant dinner table. And I said, let me stop you there. I'll tell you where the main guy whose castle it was. I'll tell you where he sat. And I said, he sat at the end at the window. He said, that's exactly right. That's exactly where he sat. And I said, by that time, most of the priests and the posh people had all gone. He said, that's right. He said, then there would be 1 or 2 cooks, people that were bringing in the breakfast. And he said, but there was a couple of children when I was there, and this guy sat there, and there was maybe 1 or 2, but it was all quiet. He said, that's exactly right. That's exactly what I remember. And he told me about the abuses he went through that we discussed last week. And then he told me, he said, Dave, I've contacted, and this is what I say to everybody. The first thing I say is, did you phone the police? And he says, I contacted the police, but they never got back to me. I said, that's funny. So something happened. A few weeks or a few months later, something happened, and I was with the police again. And I said, I know there's people that I'm sending forward to you. You're not even interviewing people. I'm going to go to the press for this again because you're covering this up. We know you are. You're not covering all these cases. And again, this is a lot of this is to do with Savo, because I'd say in 2011, once Savo came out, Everything changed. Police strategy completely changed. They had to cover up all Savills tracks in Scotland, and they did a brilliant job at it. A brilliant job at silencing people who, I know two people who were abused by Savile in Scotland, but they did a brilliant job at it and confusing a lot of people. And this guy said to me, I went to the police and nothing happened. And okay, that's fine. And then I never mentioned his name again, never mentioned his name again. And it was a few weeks later, I got a phone call. It was a woman. He said, "You Dave Sharp?" Yep. Just to tell you that so and so took his own life. He got called by the police. He went into the police station and he did an interview and he came home and he hung himself. And she says, he's got two daughters and two granddaughters. And she was devastated. She didn't blame me. She didn't blame me, but that was very typical. That was very, very typical, hearing stories like that. You know, it's just, well, and again, I have to live with that. I have to live with that because, yeah, I you know, this is the consequences of being a campaigner. This is, yeah, these you've got it there. Satanic parties and things like that. These people will go to any lens whatsoever to destroy you, to destroy your credibility, to destroy your resources, and to destroy your work, everything. You know. And again, going forward to this charity, I've got no idea. My thinking is that these people knew how easy it was, that these kind of things that people in position of power are doing throughout Scotland, how easy it was, and how easy it is for them just to jump on the bandwagon, Emma. And that's what happens, especially in Scotland. It's far too easy for people in positions of power to abuse and use and exploit, discredit, and then make false allegations. It's just far, far too easy. That we've got in Scotland, there's hospital inquiries, there's blood inquiry. There's 4 or 5 different inquiries going on right now, high profile inquiries, as well as the COVID and the post office. And in each one of them, there's a lot of people will tell you that they've had false allegations made against them, and then they've been gaslighted, and then they've been called a stalker for trying to find the truth. And this is what happened to me. And it's just, I can't understand how I've been left feeling like I'm now, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. Just, and let me show you. Stay there 1 second. This is it here. This is from the psychiatrist. I get a home visit every month from a psychiatric nurse. Every month comes to my house to make sure I'm okay. And in January, I'm starting therapy to deal with the suicidal thoughts, to try and get some sort of stability back into my life, because I can't trust anybody, Emma. It's a devastating, it's just devastating to know that a child abuse charity not only would do this, but would also be allowed to get away with this. This is what we're all struggling with. And again, it's not about suing anybody. It really isn't. It's about making sure this thing doesn't happen again, because the more louder I get without any voices or anybody backing us up and any changes being made, I'll say this loud and clear. I don't want to be the next Kevin Sutherland. You know, it's, I mean, I've got my faith, I've got God on my side, but these things are happening too frequent, far too frequent. And we know with this grooming gang thing, I've sent you some stuff that now people are asking me to speak out about, because it's been happening in Scotland and going unnoticed. But I'm trying to avoid getting involved in it, because it's with all this people on the riots and stuff getting sent to prison, with the British government now treating the justice system as a way of just binning people, then it doesn't matter who I am. I'm a number. I'm no different to anybody else. They could just come and do the same thing to me again. You know, I don't know if I could take that again, because, you know, we've got these people who are getting into prison committing suicide. This is what's happening. And but at the same time, what do? I can't turn away, Emma. You know.
100%. And it's just staggering how much you have been prosecuted simply for sharing your testimony and for being a voice for other survivors who either can't talk or have also gone through the same thing that you have, the stalking, um the false accusations, getting locked up. Like you are carrying this huge burden on your shoulders on top of your own story, and
Yeah.
I'd like to go back. You were talking about being imprisoned. So when did that end, and how did that transition happen from you coming out of prison to going back to real life? Did you go right back to advocating? How did that look for you?
As I say, I live in England now. I've lived in England for a number of years. I've only been back to Scotland once. Um, that was for with the promise. They had a conference in Edinburgh, and I went back in the hope and the expectation that they were going to stand up and speak about survivors of child sex abuse, and how they were going to start all these new awareness campaigns, and how things were going to change to make sure no child went what we went through, and nothing happened. So I've not been back to Scotland since. No, I was only in prison for 30 days. So lucky I've got a very good landlord. He's a police officer, and also a good friend of mine. And so that was fine. But as I say, I was put straight on suicide watch. I've got these visits and I've got a thing with team. But the thing is, Emma, as well, I love my country. I love Scotland, but I hate what it's done to me. I just hate how my mother died and they put me away for 16 years and did all these horrible things. And then when I got out and tried to get help, they put me straight on drugs. I end up running away to England. And then years later, when I try and get help in Scotland, the charity does this horrible thing to me, and I'm put in prison. So you can understand why, you know, I do. I hate Scotland for what it did to me, but it's my country, and I love my country, and I'll do whatever it takes to get my voice out there and to make sure nothing like this ever happens again, because it's going on all the time. We're getting young kids coming out the care system now that are walking straight into a life of addiction. You know, when you look at Kevin Sutherland, sorry, he's 38 years of age. We're only talking 15 years ago when he was coming out when he ran away from the care home and he was put straight into the sex trade. You know, when the paedophiles caught him and put him straight onto the sex trade, and then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, 5 years later, he's put in prison and told that as a 12-year-old he was setting up a call centre to blackmail people at 12. And the papers got away with this. This is why I'm saying it's so easy in Scotland to fool people. Nobody looked and thought, hang on a minute, that's it there. It's incredible to understand. This guy's been missing for 2 weeks and there hasn't been one awareness campaign. We've had 3 people disappear. I sent you some pictures, some stories. We've had 3 people disappear in the last couple of weeks, and there've been appeals on the television. This guy's been gone nearly 3 weeks now. He's jumped off a bridge, and there's been no updates, nothing. But yet, when he was 14, he spent his whole life in the care system. When he was 14, he ran away, and he got caught by paedophiles who put him in the sex trade, and then set him up in a call centre to bribe people. And then when he got to court, it was the exact same thing as happened to me. He said, "When am I going to get to speak? These paedophiles are the ones that did it to me. They're the ones. Remember? You remember when you read the paper? The exact same thing. Because you're a survivor of historical child sex abuse in Scotland, you're treated worse than a criminal. 12 years of age he was, and they're calling him setting up his own call centre, making 80 odd £1,000, blackmailing paedophiles. And he was 12. And yet all the people who did set it up, they all got away. It's incredible. In 2018-19, I've wrote this as well, when I was in Glasgow, and I was out in the at night time during the night, going round the hostels and going round in the night shelters, and I met this young guy in his late 20s, And I was handing out my leaflets. Safe. And, this is the other thing. When you get into anywhere in Scotland, when you get into these homeless centres and these hostels, at no point in any one of them do you see any literature or any, this is what upsets me, any brochures. You walk into a hostel and you say to the staff or a homeless centre, what, what training have you guys got to recognise and understand and help people who were sexually abused as children? What are you talking about? They don't even know what you're talking about. Have you got any literature that's guiding these children or these people who were abused in childhood, sorry? Have you got any literature that guides them to a charity that can help them? No. Nobody's allowed. It's unspoken of. You can't speak about it. So I was in Edinburgh, sorry, in Glasgow. And I met this, what actually happened, and I'd been in a couple of times, and one of the team leaders was sitting there who I'd met a couple of times, and he called me over. He says, Dave, he said, see that boy over there? Go and talk to him. He's told me part of his story. So this young guy, I went over, I showed him the leaflet, and he said, I Googled my name, and I showed him some of my campaigns. And he says, can I talk to you somewhere else? I'm, yeah, come on. So I went up to Glasgow City Centre to the all-night, there's an all-night KFC. And we sat in there till about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I told him my story. And he told me his story. And he says, everything you've told me, I said, everything you've told me is exactly the same that happened to me 50 years ago. Exactly the same. What had happened is he was in Edinburgh and he was a rent boy. And one of his friends had died and disappeared, and he didn't know anything else. He believed he'd been murdered, right? Now, he'd been in Glasgow for a year, hiding, homeless, hiding from these paedophile rings in Edinburgh, which he believed were high up judges. So the next day, I happened to have a meeting in Falkirk with the same woman, the same charity, and the police. I'll tell you the police officer's name because it's okay to say that. Chief Inspector Kerr Duncan of the Child Abuse Unit. We were having a meeting about we were going to work together to get a brochure from the police that we could use because we wanted to work with the police to help encourage more people to come forward. We wanted to get a brochure that we could give to people on the streets because what was happening, Emma, was when I was going on the streets of Glasgow trying to encourage people to come forward, people would say to me, oh, I came forward 25 years ago, nothing was done, nothing's changed. So I went to the police, the child abuse unit, and I said to them, I said, listen, I want to work with you. Show me what's different. Show me what's changed over the last 25 years so that I can go on the streets and shout for you and encourage people to see. So I went on the streets and I said to people, things have changed. Resources have changed. Attitudes changed. A lot of things have changed now. And I said to a lot of people, the thing is, with these new resources, you could be the missing link to a paedophile ring that's been going on for years. And people say to me, I never thought of it like that, Dave. I said, a lot of these rings have been going on for years. And that's when I said earlier on about the police were telling me more and more paedophiles were getting caught. More people were coming forward. What we were doing was working, Emma. So this young boy was telling me all this stuff. So when I met with Chief Inspector Kerr Duncan, I was telling him names and things I knew. And this woman, this charity woman who was there, she said, he's right. That's the same ring that's been going on for ages. And then they said, can you go back and get him? But I knew. If I went back the next night, he's gone. Because once you tell your story, Emma, you've got to leave. No matter who it is. If you're on the run, remember, I was on the run for 40 years. So I know exactly what this young boy, I was there 50 years ago, right? As soon as you tell your story, you've got to disappear again. Unless you've got the proof, unless you've got the evidence, or you know the consequences of your actions, safe enough to come out. If you haven't, then, and I mean, there's no point going down the next day because he would have moved to another town. That's what you do. And so yeah, I was on the streets talking about this kind of thing. That listen, that these things are happening, but these things are helping. Things are different. Now, that was only 2018-19. Also, at the same time, there was a thing called Social Bite, which was a cafe set up in Edinburgh. We had Leonardo DiCaprio, and who's the another famous movie star in America, George Clooney. They came over and opened it. So it was the guy who owned it, his father was an entrepreneur who knew lots of people, famous people, and they set up this cafe thing, and they did a sleep out where thousands of people in Edinburgh came and slept out. And what happened is, I heard the story about this, that some homeless people went and they were telling them they were homeless. And I was interested to learn, what did you do with the homeless people? And did they mention they were sexually abused? And I went and met the owners, the people who ran it. And so it's very, very interesting. So I developed a relationship with them. And they says, the next time we're doing another sleep out, they did another one in Edinburgh and another one in Glasgow. And they allowed me and my group to come and set up a stall so that we could hand out our S.A.F.E leaflets and share our stories. And it was great. But the girl, one of the managers who told me, she says, Dave, we're getting an awful lot of young kids. This is 2019, Emma. We're getting a lot of young kids. And she mentioned one name, this girl's name. And I said, there's a girl I'm in connection with on Twitter. And she lives in Edinburgh and she's homeless. And she's only got a pay-as-you-go phone. So she goes in the library and she talks to me on the library Twitter account. And I've been speaking to her for ages. And she says, this might be the same girl. So, and she was telling me some stuff about how these kids are all trying to get help. Some of them are running away from the care homes at 15 and just not going back. And I thought, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. So I asked her, I said, listen, I'd like to arrange a meeting. Could I? Anyway, I went up to Edinburgh and I met her. And she had her pals with her. There was 4 girls and 2 boys. And I invited people from the Promise. I said to them, this is what I'm doing. These are the people. This is where I'm going. Come with me. I've told them you're coming. And other people who I've got to be careful how I say this, you know, very prominent people who work with children who, let's not go down there just yet. No, leave it. Anyway, so I met these kids and they were living in a squat in Edinburgh. Now, remember I told you the story about the rucksacks? How when I was 16, 50 years ago, how I met these kids in London who all had rucksacks with their change of clothes and their pictures of their family in the rucksacks, who'd turn up in London homeless as a 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds and then disappear. Well, these kids, these 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds took me to this squat, and in the squat was all these rucksacks in the corner. And this girl said, Dave, I've told my pals about you. Will you share your story? Will you share your testimony with us? Now, they were all sitting there on drugs, drinking, and I think I brought a 6-pack of Lucasade. That was my carry out. I brought 6 cans of Lucasade in there, but they were all doing their thing, and I sat there, and they had this electricity, they had the gas camping stoves so that they could fix up. And it was the exact same squat I was in 50 years ago, right? It was the exact same place I was in 50 years ago. And we sat and shared our testimonies, and I didn't want to leave. I wasn't going to leave till every single one of them had fell asleep, because I didn't want to leave with the rucksacks in the corner, because I knew that when I woke up, the first thing I would remember was the rucksacks from 50 years ago. Do you remember the story? When I was squatting in London. Yeah. So this is me going back 50 years. Now, 50 years later, I'm in Edinburgh. I'm in a squat with these kids who are telling me all the stories. They're all on the sex game, telling themselves for sex in 2019 in Edinburgh. And nothing's changed. And what happened is, shortly after that, the pandemic came in. So I lost contact with them. And I would give anything, I would give anything in the world to go back up there and find them again. But having said that, I would also give anything in the world to go back 50 years and find all those kids that I met when I was 16 in London who were all running away from homes. Because I think every day about them. That's my whole life. Every day I think about how many of these kids are still alive. How many stayed on the streets? How many are now living in warm houses like me now? You know? And that's why I go to bed every night. I just thank God. I say, God, I just thank you so much for everything you've done to take me to this place where I am now, where I can share my story of what happened to me. I said, it's just an absolute miracle. And as I say, sometimes I get up during the night and I walk into here, my living room, and I sit kissing the coffee table or I kiss the television because I've never had it. I said, I've never had anything of my own. And now to have all this, I just feel so blessed that I've got this amazing story. And as I say, when I go into the bathroom and I look and I've got these good looks as well, I just think it's amazing. Amen.
It is. You are an absolute miracle. We're so lucky that we get to hear your story. It's like I picture that little boy that you are and how desperately he wanted somebody like you in his life, and you
Yeah,
became the person that you didn't have. And he's so
yeah,
proud of you, Dave. What a miracle that you're here to be able to share and that you avoided and worked so hard to not become a statistic and to not get pulled into the depravity that they want survivors to be in. I know you did for a little bit. You've grappled with addiction, you've grappled with homelessness, but you always figured out a way to overcome it. And I think because of that, we have so much to learn from your story because so many survivors are in that rock bottom and they give up. They don't know that there's a way out. They don't have that hope. They don't have anybody telling them that there's a way that they can live, that they can
yeah,
keep going, that it's worth it, that they can use their story that has caused them so much pain and they can do something with it to change what happened, to change what's going to happen, to help
yeah.
other people and to turn that pain into a purpose, which you have done and you continue to do. And I also really appreciate that you share your vulnerabilities and that it hasn't been a smooth ride, that it's been really hard, that you're still dealing with being gaslit and being retaliated against and being targeted and discredited. You're still dealing with the emotional side effects of that. And, you're still overcoming so much. I think that that's just so beautiful that you've still chosen, despite everything that you went through, you didn't give up. You kept going. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you for the survivors on the other end who don't have hope and who are in despair, who want to give up, what would you say to them?
Healing, healing doesn't have to be painful. Healing is part of the journey. And while you're healing, you can be in pain, but healing can also be a direction if you're looking for a direction in something in your life. But here's the thing as well, if you're looking for somewhere at the end of the tunnel, when you give your heart to Christ, when we all get to heaven, when I get to heaven, I don't want to have all the burden and the weight and the grief and the pain and the anger and all that stuff that I carried for so long, the hate, the anger, the resentment of what all these people did to me. When I get to heaven, I want to meet my wife and my child, and I want to spend the rest of my eternity with my wife and my mother in the garden of peace, sitting playing my guitar, and my little kid jumping, running about, picking apples, and then meeting all these people that I've known for all these years, and all the children whose lives were taken or lost because of child sex abuse. Now, everybody has that opportunity. Everybody has the opportunity to see that light. We just haven't found it yet. But if we pray together, if we work together, and if we listen to each other's stories, don't be afraid to come out and tell your story, because everybody's story is so important. And the more you speak, the less the pain is. When I told you when I was in Edinburgh, when I got into these backpacker hostels, when you go in there and you find all these homeless people who live there, just they get a bed for the night just so that they can get some food, and they work. Every one of these people's got the same story, that they're carrying so much trauma of what's happened in their childhood, but they don't realise that even where they are now, you've managed to get yourself a job. You've managed to get yourself off the street. You've managed to find me, who is in the same boat, but may necessarily be a bit ahead, but we're all in the same direction. And it's about keeping in touch and making sure it doesn't matter where you are in the world. I've got so many friends, as you know, in America now that somebody you know very well who said to me a beautiful, beautiful thing. She said, if we hadn't been through so much pain, we could have been so much greater friends than we are already. So powerful, eh? And I knew exactly what she meant. It's just that here's the thing: there's a lot of people out there that have got the gift of life in the sense that they've everybody's had heartache and things. But when you see these people who they're good looking, they're talented, and they've got a strong family, and I fought for years. I thought, well, I would give anything. But now I look at them and I think that's the example of God's love. That's the example of what God wants us all to be. But because man got in the way, not God, it was man that did the bad things to us. If we can learn to deal with them by forgiveness, by overcoming, and by example, then we're leading people on that same path, and that's what we all want to do, eh? It's and again, the rewards are going to be amazing. The rewards are going to be just, I'm going to be the new lead singer for AC/DC. Yeah, I'm going to be the best footballer in heaven. I've got all these things, but it's everything in this. I not just big. I mean, on the one hand, you get lots of people say, "I don't want to leave this life because I've got a beautiful family and I'm rich and I'm successful and I've got so much to lose." And then I say, "Well, listen, I've got nothing, but I've got everything to gain in the next world when I get to heaven. So who's the better off?" And you're not jealous or anything like that. It's just that I feel blessed. I feel blessed. I've been chosen. It's a really, really powerful testimony. But there is a thing as righteous anger, Emma. There is a thing as righteous anger if you use it properly. That's why I know for a fact, as I said earlier on, there's people that follow me on Twitter who I know they listen, watch, and see every single thing I do, and they're scared. They're scared of what I'm going to do next, and because they know I know so much. But yeah, there's you can't get away with harming God's children. You can't. You just can't. You can't get away with harming God's children. And one of the things I wanted to say that I forgot, I didn't mention, one of the things that and again, because I'm going to be taking this video to the police. When I went to court, you remember when I told you that the Procurator Fiscal had already dropped the assault charge, right? So once the Procurator Fiscal drops a charge, that can't get used in court again. This is what I've learned since, right? So when we went to court, and when this lawyer, my lawyer, the judge is saying, right, what's this man here for? And this lawyer saying, oh, this guy, he's done the, we believe, I don't think the judge even knew what the lawyer was talking about. Well, what's he actually done? Well, he sent these menacing text messages. There's no threats or anything like that, but yeah, you still have to be there. And when the judge turned around and said, right, over to the Procurator Fiscal and said, what was this man originally charged with? So they brought up the charges that had already been dropped. Well, we've been told that's illegal. You can't do that. And I've contacted the police and I told the police, and again, nothing. Even since I was down in London before Christmas, I was told at least one, possibly two other people have contacted Police Scotland with further statements about my case. And when I phoned the police, I was told, right, someone will get back to you. And no one did. So this is still going on. This is still, what do we have to do? I've contacted the Labour leader in Scotland, Anna Sawar. I've contacted the Conservative leader. Now, the Conservative leader in Scotland, Russell Finlay, This guy met the woman who did these things to me in a meeting inside Scottish Parliament, where he turned around and says to this woman, there's something not right here with you. There's something not right with what's happening. And we were all watching this live in the Parliament. And I contacted this guy dozens of times. I said, please help me. You're in a position. He was the Justice Secretary then. Go look at the video again and listen to me. He was asking some questions, but we had the answers to. The answer, basically saying, why are you not coming out and showing all the records of all the survivors, all your clients? And she was saying, oh no, it's private. We can't do that. We don't want that. That was rubbish. The real reason was that none of the clients were getting the proper treatment and the proper help. And also on top of that, she was paying herself a huge salary. You know what I mean? And all this was being kept under the radar. And whenever anybody tried and spoke out like me, what happened was what happened. And it's so unfair. So this Conservative leader, I'm, 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 I've said in the next election next year, I'm going to stand against him. If he's campaigning in Edinburgh or Glasgow, I'm going to go independent, and I'm going to stand as an independent candidate representing survivors of child sex abuse, and I'm going to say, this man ignored us. You ignored us. You could have helped us, and you didn't. I'm not the only one. There's other people as well that have had similar cases. And again, it's just those that are in positions of power are paid to help us and do this. And it's just because it's Scotland, we see now in Britain, the Labour Party are doing the same thing. When serious accusations are made, the easiest thing for them to do is just ignore it. Just ignore it. All the riots, you know, the man that killed the three babies, the three children. There's so much stuff coming out that it would have been so much easier just to tell us the truth at the beginning, instead of sending these people to prison who it turns out that their suspicions may have been right all along. But because you're a politician, you think you can get away with that, or in a position of power. We can't stop that fight, Emma. We have to keep fighting and bring along as many people as we can. So the answer to your question about all those people who, you know, don't know where they're all warriors. We're all warriors in our own sense, whether it's behind the keyboard or whether it's on. I call myself a foot soldier. You know, I'm not a great speaker. I love writing. You know, and we haven't spoke about my book yet, but I love writing. But I see in everybody. I see in every single survivor, whether it's a sentence on Twitter or whether it's reading a book, whatever it is, it's that you see in everybody there's a warrior, you know, and we're all in the same fight. And that fight is, when you get to heaven, not going to be just, when St. Peter gets to the gates of heaven and St. Peter says, did you put my children first? He'd be able to say, yes, I did. But not only that, see all the people that abused me and all the people that did the bad things to me, I brought them with me because I managed to forgive them. So I'm asking you to let them in as well. That's power. That's God's power. That's real power. Amen.
Amen, Dave. And I want you to talk about your book also, because that's really exciting. But before we do, you were talking about how we are not getting an empathetic response from authorities, which is true. And it really is difficult to fight them. We sort of have to depend on the general public to step in this fight with us. So there's more of us than them, and we can demand change from them. So I wanted to ask you on the other end, society does the same thing and they look away, they discredit, they gaslight because for one, they don't understand, but for two, I think we're just really trained through the media and how mean people have gotten to just automatically be mean as a response. And I wanted to ask you, how can society be there for survivors? In a perfect world, how can a regular person be there for survivors in a way that is going to move this forward?
Not listen to the politicians.
Amen to that. Yeah.
Turn your back on the politicians. I've always said it. If we're going to do this, we have to find a way to do it and take the responsibility away from the politicians. Now, in Scotland, very briefly, right, now, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, with the problem in Scotland, right, was because of what we said 50 years ago, that nobody bothered with people in the care system, right? So what happened is, if you fast forward to the 80s and 90s and then sort of 2000s, we knew that in order for all the people, all the survivors of child sex abuse, just in care, just in care, right? Institutional, right? Just institutional. In 2010 and 12, if all the survivors of institutional abuse were to come forward, it would cost in excess of £350 million, right? Now, the politicians knew then that we were all screaming for a public inquiry. I was had the T-shirts on. I was standing on the streets asking for a public inquiry. But we knew, and the politicians knew that we knew, that they knew that we knew, that if you have a public inquiry, you also got to have a redress scheme, right? So we knew then, and there were certain politicians, I want to, the one in particular who's dead now, right, Alex Salmond, right, he had the vision to see. He knew if we have a public inquiry followed by it's going to take 10 years. Now, if you fast forward 10 years to 2023, if all the survivors of in-care abuse were to come forward, it would cost in excess of £750 million, which A, the Scottish Government haven't got, and B, the Catholic Church aren't going to, no chance. So therefore, the only way we can deal with this situation is to take the responsibility away from the politicians, sit down and get the right pay people in a room, social workers, police officers. You know, you can't leave out any kind of category apart from the politicians, because there's good and bad in everywhere. And the job is to find the good people within the police force and the social services and the promise. And we know there is good people in the promise, but you've got to find these people how we can sit down and say, right, this is what's needing done, and this is the money needed. Now, I've always said this, right? When you talk about when you're dealing with survivors or any child or any you know, if you're a counsellor, you know, if you lead with your heart, it doesn't cost anything. Amen. So if we got the right people in the room that said, listen, I would do this for nothing, I would do this for nothing, you know, and not literally, obviously you've got to feed your family, but really, you know, if we found enough people who said, right, this is what we can do. And here's the thing, to answer your question, I don't have the answer, but I know a room full of people would. And I know a room full of people. I know there's people out there that would want to do this and sit in a room and say, right, this is what we need to do. You know, we've got to create that environment where any child coming out the care system does not walk into addiction or does not walk into a life of crime. And any child who's coming out the care system who goes through a court system, we have to make sure that it's mandatory that they must have a psychiatric report first. In fact, any survivor of child sex abuse going through the justice system has to have a psychiatric report first. And with the object being, you have to do everything you can to keep them back at institutions and abuse, because that's where we're failed. The justice system has failed so long. Because what we have in this country is that it's so easy. It's the easiest thing in the world. At what point does somebody who's trying to pursue justice, at what point is somebody who's been gaslighted, had false allegations made against them, who's trying to get the truth, at what point and what right do the justice system have to say that that man is a stalker, therefore a criminal? At what point? Show me the dictionary. Because give us the dictionary and let us work with your justice system dictionary, and let's see if we can work together on stop these people doing these crimes, and also helping the victims and the survivors go the other way to get help. It's not going to cost anywhere near that amount of money. You know, talk about this, the apple tree, the tree of hearts. You know, when somebody comes forward, we can do all this stuff to help them, and we can say, if somebody comes in that's been, I've always used you see social bite I was talking about. the homeless charity. I would do another charity, and I was asked to go and speak somewhere, and I said, if somebody came forward who was sexually abused and homeless, and you're going to house them, but they've been in that many situations, bed sits, hostels, that they're fed up running. So what are you going to do to make sure you put them in this house that they're never going to want to leave again? So I wrote on the board my life story. 16 years in care, sexually abused, no family, straight into addiction, mental health issues, lost his wife, got put in prison. So what you've got to do is you've got to devise a welcome pack to give to that person when he moves into this new house, and you're going to become his key worker. So you've got 15 minutes to write down what you would put in the welcome pack.
Great
In
answer.
15 minutes, you'll find out how dedicated that person is, the key worker. One woman said, and this woman was on £70,000 a year. She wrote down, she finished it in a minute. She says, and we looked at it, I would go around every night with a packet of custard cream biscuits. Like someone who has trouble forming relationships wants you round at his house every single night at 6 o'clock. You're missing the point. You've got to find his needs, find what went wrong first, find the right direction for him, and how to give him hope. And you can do it at no cost, because you've got your Google there. You can find the nearest child abuse charity. You can find a new grievance centre. And what you do then is what I did with the last charity I was working on, where we did the Footsteps project. The Footsteps project was where you get somebody who you're going to give them a house, and the Footsteps project is walking side by side with somebody who's homeless, and you got four quarter targets. So in the first 3 months, you set out all the medical needs and family needs, and then the second, you work out his housing requirements. And then, sorry, in the first month, you go over all the things that's holding them back, like court cases, like unable to join the housing list, like being in debt. And you go, and I've done it. I've gone to court with people and said, listen, we'll look after this guy, and we're going to make sure he gets a house, and we'll make sure we can set up a proper system where he can pay his debts back, and you gradually just bring the hope back to these people so that they've got a direction in their life again. And the one who was staying with us, he was a Glasgow man who'd been in and out of prison because 2 of his children died in a fire, and he was just treated as a criminal. And what we did with him was it was just, he's like my brother. But what we did is we put him in this house, and we said, right, because he had another child as well that had been taken off him. I said, I can get you a job painting and decorating. I can get you a certain amount of money each week. But what you need to do is, and this isn't in any rule book. I said, but every week you get paid, you've got to buy a bit of furniture, a pre-pack. And he said, well, what am I going to need pre-pack for? He says, because once you start building furniture, then you're going to start thinking about getting a house or somewhere to live for yourself and get off the streets. And that's what we did. So there's all these things you can do for people that, I'm not saying I'm the only one that ever does these things. Of course I'm not. But helping people, especially survivors of child sex abuse, leaving it to the politicians is just not going to work, Emma. We've tried it all. It's all been tried. It's just everything. A lot of these charities that do this job, that they're all burdened by, they're committed to, all the funding's paid for by the government. So they're all silenced. We know that happens.
Absolutely. And do you know if this Footsteps project, is this something that is just in the UK, or what other ways would you recommend that people could help survivors? What other resources do survivors need?
Well, I'm in England, so that was just a charity. I was with the charity for 7 years. I was a volunteer for 7 years with that charity, and that was just one of the projects they did. And I also set up a football club. So Northampton Football Club every week, every home game. I took up to 20 people to the football. And the idea being we used to focus on men who had been separated from their children. So I would encourage the football club to give us equal amount of children's tickets and adult tickets. So then what we would do is most of these guys who were alcoholics or in some sort of addiction, who were living in our houses, the can houses, so we were encouraging them to bring their kids. And what would happen is they would bring their children to the football, and then during the week we would get phone calls from the parents, the mothers, and the mothers would say, "Oh, my kids keep talking about the football. They said it was brilliant, absolutely great." And I would say, "Well, why don't you come?" They said, "What do you mean? I don't follow football." But can you imagine how your kids will feel if mum and dad's there together? So what happened is we started getting the women to come, the mothers, and in 7 years we had 2 new children and 2 weddings, which I'm really proud of. But yeah, we had people reunited. It was a really successful project that I did. It was very, very successful. Yeah.
Amazing. Now I want to talk about your book, Dave. Let's talk about the projects that you're working on and your, ways that people can support you.
Well, this is what I'm saying. I'm not doing anything right now because and again, I don't want to sort of. I've never been one for bigging myself up, but I'm 65, but I still feel 25, Emma. I still feel with my testimony, I've got so much to offer. It's I want to get back on the streets. I want to be helping people, but I know at the moment this is going to take. I've got to start therapy, but again, my testimony is very, very powerful. But I've just got a love since I became born again. I've just got a love of helping people, and it's never ever left me. And people say, a lot of people say, they say there's something special about you. You're very, very passionate, and this is what happens when you open your heart to God and you let Christ into your life. It just gives you so much strength and power, and it's amazing. And this is what I try and do. But again, it's very, very easy for these people in position of power to use that against you. That's and it's serious. It exists, and it's all around us. And without that faith and that dedication and commitment to Christ, it's I've got to be so careful because I could easily. Every time you make something a good step, there's always somebody willing, ready to knock you down, and that's a very true thing in Scotland. People don't like other people going out of their comfort zones or making something of their lives. And I don't say that to criticise. It's always been a Scottish trait that people think that. And again, when I started doing all the campaigning, Emma, I didn't realise for a single second that anybody would be offended or upset or jealous. I just couldn't understand. So you had the jealousy, then you had the people who wanted what I had, which was a great idea, and also wanted my passion, to stop my passion, and now it's heavy, it's hard. My heart's like a concrete slab, and what am I going to do next? I've got to keep taking this therapy. I've got to start this new therapy course, and try and keep reaching out to people. And every day, I believe something big, And I know that your support, with your podcast that will go out again, and people are got to hear these stories. I've heard a couple, and as I say, none touched me more than Kenny's. None touched me more. That the bond that you had with him as well was fantastic. That's what I really loved, and because he was such a likable. And again, this is what I'm saying. Like, if I don't talk to you again, which I probably won't, because we live on the other side of the world, we'll talk on Twitter. But I often have this inferiority complex. Oh, doesn't he like me? Doesn't and then I realise part of that is my problem with relationships. And it's so much going on up here that again, because what's happened is took away my trust. That's the hardest thing, to not trust people. I've got people in Scotland now, as I say, Like the one in America. People just, we miss you. We miss Dave Sharp, the funny and happy, and all your tweets are so deep, and we love your tweets, and you're a great writer, and I really do love writing. I really do. I can sit here, most of my tweets, I'm here for 8 hours just to write one tweet, and I'm changing paragraphs and stuff, and I've had a lot of people say, you really are a special writer, and yeah, I love it. So the more people I can get on my tweet, the better. It'd be great. But yeah, I started my book
Twitter,
along.
your handle is Dave Sharp 59. So for
Yeah,
people who want to go on there, I'll have that in the show notes, but that is his handle. Go ahead, Dave.
yeah. And I say I started my book a long time ago, and I told you already, I've got another book, not written, but I've got a poem book of Bob Dylan songs, just all Bob Dylan songs, and some Beatles songs, and some Neil Young songs that I've converted into child abuse poems and stuff I've made up myself, and I've kind of integrated them into the book. And I really think this book's going to be powerful. I think it's going to be I'm not going to say a bestseller, I'm not going to say anything like that, but if I get it right, and if I get it published, I think it's going to. I think it's going to impact, because I say I've got a few extracts on Twitter, and again, because it's such an amazing, powerful story. It's an incredible story. But yeah, that's always been my one talent. My one talent was writing, um, which I love doing. But and again, I thought I'd finished it. I thought I'd retired. I thought I had when S.A.F.E was going, and I was talking about at the end of the child abuse inquiry, we're all going to get together and we're going to sit. This is the government and the survivors. We're all going to sit down and we're going to have this big party, and everybody. And God, how naive was I? How naive could I possibly be? It's incredible that that somebody could be so cruel. And again, that was when it just paused. It just stopped there, and I thought, right, I can't, because I can't. Emma, how can I end it here? It's not an end, is it? There's no end. There's got to be, even. I mean, I don't do the lottery, but even if I win the lottery, I wouldn't. That's nothing. That's nothing to my story. That money's nothing. It's nothing to do with how much money I make or anything like that. And as I said, if I win the lottery, I wouldn't sort of just, right, that's it, I'm off. Taxi to the Bahamas. That wouldn't happen. I would still be doing this, and hopefully, if I'd finished my book, I just plan to go on a tour all over the world. I wanted to go around the world, and I've met so many people who, people that IRA murderers, who else? Big bank robbers, gangsters, and on the Christian circuit. When you go and see Christian speakers, I've been to see hundreds of them, and I've thought that, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to go around the world in churches, in halls, wherever it is, prisons. I've always wanted to go into prisons and share my testimony with paedophiles, sex offenders, and say, listen, I'm a product of what you do, and let them read my story about what happens to the survivors, how it destroys our lives. So that was my plan, and it still is my plan. It is still my plan, because I believe at some time, I do believe at some time the truth's going to come out, and I still believe that. I've got to still believe that, and yeah, it's a great story. It's wow, it's fantastic.
Is there any date that we can sort of, maybe not an exact date, but are you close to being done? Do you think that'll come out this year? Is that something that we can look forward to soon or not yet?
No, not until I mean, I've got to get this. I've got to get the truth. I can't leave it. I'm a criminal. I'm classed as a criminal, and every day I wake up with this great big black mark on my chest that says criminal, and I know I'm not, and I can't do anything else until I get rid of this. And the only way I can get rid of this is for these people who did this horrible thing to come out and say, we got it wrong, we lied. Now, the woman who did it, she was able to retire, or resign, sorry. She was able to resign and sneak out the back door. And she's a Labour councillor. You know, she's still working as a Labour in the Labour Party. And I'm sitting here with this black mark that says criminal. And I can't live like this. This is why I'm on suicide watch. To do everything in your life and then spend all those years turning your life around, to then have somebody come along and do this. It's just so heavy. It's such a burden. You know, it takes up every ounce of energy. And so, do I believe there's going to be a magic ending to my story? Yes, I do. Do I want to see MD in prison and hurt? No, I don't. But I do believe in, as I said, righteous anger. And I really do believe that these people are sitting now thinking it's only a matter of time before we're going to get caught for this, because you can't get away with these kind of things. You can't. It's even if I was to taken into, if my door went again now and I went back to prison, it wouldn't change anything in my head about getting justice. It wouldn't change. I'd probably lose my flat, you know, if it was a long time. But I'm not going to do anything at all, Emma, that's going to want them to do that to me, other than, but we know even just putting things on Twitter now can get you put in prison. So I don't know, you know what I mean? So am I a target? I was told for many, many times I'm a target, just because of who I am. Not what I've done, but just because I'm a child sex abuse, satanic ritual abuse survivor. Just being that makes you a target, as you well know, you know. So to push that further, or to try and, you know, get justice in between that is going to be very, very hard. But as I say, when I was in Canterbury Cathedral a month ago, I met this guy. I'm not going to say nothing about him, but this is the guy I've been seeing down in London. And I went down, I went for dinner, I told you, and the starter was £7. Just, I think it was like, was it £90 for my meal? The stuff, and they came out with this meal, and it was like a chicken wing, a baby carrot, and a little table tennis ball of potato. And I said, sorry, I didn't ask for a starter. And they said, that's not the starter, that's your main meal. And it was like £90, just this really, really posh. But this guy said he wants to help me. He's looking at the case. And I had to buy one of these, the old granny trolleys. I had to buy an old granny trolley with all my evidence, and invited me down. He said, I want you to come down and stay with my family at Christmas, but I didn't. I don't like doing that. I don't like, no, I don't like going to visit people. It's, but yeah, so I'm waiting to hear from him, and hopefully, again, but this is another thing. It's like so many times people say, oh, I want to help you, and this, but it ends nowhere. And until we get somebody who can actually sit down with Police Scotland and say, you've got to open this back up again, you know, because you're going to have another Kevin Sutherland, you know, and again, that's why these people here, because I live in England, the psychiatrist says, we can't get involved, Dave. If it was England, my psychiatrist could write a letter to the police, but because it's Scotland and another country, and I've said to them, I said, can you not write to them and say, listen, you have to listen to this guy's story. He didn't do this, you know, but they can't, they're not allowed to. And as I say, my psychiatric nurse, Claire, who comes every month and sits for an hour, and I have to tell her every month about, you know, sometimes I live a mile. I live a mile from the M1. Sometimes when it's pouring the rain, I walk down in just a t-shirt and I get soaking wet, and I walk down to the bridge and I stand at the edge, and it's a roundabout, and I walk round the bridge and I come back up the road. and I go to the edge of suicide because I know I've got this battle going on inside. And I tell this lady about it, and she says the same. All we can do is wait and hope that somebody in Scotland is going to listen, because I never did these things. I never did them, and the people up there know that. Then you'll see a new Dave Sharp. But I don't know what else I can do. It's I just don't know what else I can do to get these people to. And as I say, when you said earlier on about getting the right people together to normal, ordinary people, how we can work together to help survivors, well, that's becoming a crime now. You can go to prison for just for thinking like that now. So that's the kind of job we got. Timing wise is not great, is it? If it was 5 or 10 years ago that we were talking about, maybe different. Then you could get a load of people or organisations that would want to help. But nowadays, just speaking like this can get you put in prison. Sounds like we're in North Korea, doesn't it? Or Russia. I sit here sometimes, Emma, and I watch the news and I watch Russia, and I see these young girls who all stand on the streets with banners, knowing that when they get taken away, they're going to be in prison for 10, 15, 20 years. That's the courage. And that's the courage you need to be a child abuse campaigner in Scotland and probably everywhere else. It's just so difficult because we're fighting against evil people.
100%. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's really validating for other survivors and, even for advocates to get to learn what a survivor goes through even after the abuse stops. It really doesn't ever stop. And there's so much work that we have to do as a society. We have to do work on the ground like you are. We have to get more foot soldiers out there advocating and speaking up and sharing these testimonies and having the courage to listen to them and to post about them, to go approach charities, to do these different, walks and these events. Like we really do need more support on the ground, and it's going to take people like you to help, kick some motivation into some people. So Dave, I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your testimony and giving us all this invaluable information on your story, and then for being a voice for so many others who aren't in a position to talk about this publicly the same way that you are. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And what is the best way that people can connect with you and keep up with you? Is that Twitter, or is there other ways
Just
that?
on, just on Twitter, yeah. Yeah. And I forgot to say as well, when I do get my book, I'm not going to charge any money. People just send me a milkshake. If people want to buy my book, it's only going to cost a strawberry milkshake.
That's a good deal.
But yeah, I mean, it's a story of recovery and forgiveness. It's a story of how you can come from such a dark place, Emma. When you've spent 16 years of your life locked up, you would never imagine that you could end up being back put into an institution and then coming out the other end. But again, it's a story of recovery again, and yeah, it's a powerful story. But again, it's there's thousands of Dave Sharps, and it's only by more and more people coming out speaking together that you're the one that's got the catalogue. It's yeah, we need more and more people coming forward. The more voices that come forward, the stronger we all become. Yeah. And listen, it's been great talking to you.
Same,
And
Dave.
and I really admire and respect your courage for what you do. I know I know what you go through as well. I know the attacks that you get and stuff. I'm aware of all that. But again, it's we're all one family.
We are, and there's more of us than them. So it is
Yeah,
an honor to have you on, Dave. I'd love to have you on again to maybe, talk more about grooming or some of these, do a deep dive into some things that maybe we could educate society on a little bit more. Your
hmm
wealth of knowledge, and we can't wait till your book comes out. We'll definitely have to bring you on to help promote that. And,
yeah,
I just thank you from myself and from the whole community for all the selfless work that you've done for so many decades, without getting without getting the justice that you deserve and the peace that you deserve ultimately. I hope everybody's praying, and I know everybody's praying that you do get that, and I encourage everybody to go follow you on Twitter. Dave's email also is right on his Twitter page. So if you want to reach out to him via email, you can go right to his Twitter page and his email's there. Share this episode, you guys. Send it to any care abuse survivors, people that have been through something similar. We have to let survivors know that they're not alone. And there's so much valuable information just in this testimony that, can provide that and provide that comfort to other people and give them that hope to keep going. So we couldn't do this without you guys, and I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you, and we will see you next time.